Chapter 1129, Returning to the Joint Peace Planet. Ever since being groped by Ling Han, the Empress had naturally viewed him as a perverted, vulgar, and shameless scoundrel. However, after spending close to 2 years together, she realized that Ling Han's conduct was nothing short of noble. The restraint that he had shown at the end even more so required overwhelming willpower and resolution. Moreover, he had even exposed his precious treasure in order to protect her purity. It could be said that his conduct was blindingly noble. Could she still kill Ling Han? Of course not. That would be repaying kindness with hatred. In fact, Empress Luanxing rejoiced slightly in the fact that she had been trapped with Ling Han, and not some other man. If it were another man, she would have definitely lost her purity and chastity already. Just thinking about such a possibility made her shudder and feel a strong sense of lingering fear. Moreover, in order to ensure that he received a disciple, Notionless Saint would have definitely made her copulate several times. This was even more terrifying. In a sense, Ling Han was a big benefactor of hers. In fact, she owed him so much that she wouldn't be able to repay him this entire lifetime. The problem was, the memories of her kissing, hugging, and intertwining with him were all seared into her mind as well. How could she relax upon recalling these events? There was a heavy burden on her, and it was her goal to become the strongest cultivator in the world. There was a blemish in her Tao heart now, and this would potentially affect her future cultivation. What could she do about this? How could she not be worried? In the end, she could only reply with a soft This was her way of saying, I know. Ling Han could understand her difficulties to a certain degree. However, he wasn't female, after all, and he was more so not Empress Luanxing. Perhaps he could only understand less than 1% of what she was feeling at the moment. Your Majesty, let's pretend the events of these past few days never occurred. What do you say? Empress Luanxing was riled up upon hearing this. Only she could say that. You touched me, kissed me, and embraced me, yet you want to pretend none of that happened with a mere few words? If Ling Han knew of her thoughts, he would definitely shout that he was being wronged, because it was in fact this Empress that had touched him, kissed him, and embraced him, okay? If it hadn't been for his strong willpower, there was even a strong possibility that she would have fucked him. Unfaithful man. Empress Luanxing scolded in her mind. However, she instantly chided her own thoughts. Was this man worthy of being her husband? No way. She humphed, and said, or else. Perhaps you wanted to remember them and have more fantasies about me? Ah. She's truly not cute at all. She's far too haughty. Ling Han sighed in his mind. Being beautiful indeed gave one the right to be whimsical. Although she had thrown a barb at him, he couldn't dislike her no matter what. He nodded in his mind. He definitely had to keep his distance from this stunning beauty. Otherwise, he would genuinely lose himself to her. Ling Han and Empress Luanxing both remained silent and lost in their own thoughts. Meanwhile, under the manipulation of Notionless Saint, a starship surprisingly appeared within the large tomb. Although Notionless Saint had been severely wounded, and even had his saintly origin stolen, he had still been a saint, after all. He had made many preparations before his death. This hidden starship being one of them had prepared this for his future disciple. However, it was possible for him to live a second life now, so of course he took this starship out to use now. This was a small starship, and it was only fitted with a small number of defensive formations. These formations were used to deal with meteoroids or black holes that suddenly appeared in the galaxy. They didn't possess any offensive ability. The starship was too small, after all, so it was impossible to carve too many formations onto it. Nothing could have been done about this. Notionless Saint had only prepared this in the moments before his death, so what time did he have to make things perfect? He returned to the Black Tower after summoning the starship. Only his divine sense was left right now, and he had even refined his own saintly might. Thus, it was impossible for him to stay alone in the outside world for too long. Instead, it was necessary for him to attach himself to external objects such as the reincarnation tree. Not only would this allow him to live on, but it would even allow him to live on better. This was a godly tree that required 12 trillion years to grow. Could its effects not be spectacular? Relying on the preparations that he had left, it was still possible for him to suppress the heavenly body tier elites in this large tomb. In fact, it was even possible for him to suppress weaker eternal river tier elites. Once he left this large tomb, however, he would merely be a damaged soul that had refined his own saintly might, no less. In other words, he would pose absolutely no threat. Apart from giving Ling Han some suggestions, he could do absolutely sh*t all. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Empress Luanxing were both sitting inside the starship. There were no resting rooms or anything of the sort, and there was only a single cabin. However, this cabin was definitely bigger than Ling Han's cloud-piercing shuttle. It was able to fit around 10 people. The atmosphere was quite delicate, with neither of them speaking to each other. However, they were stuck in a small space, after all, so Ling Han could still smell the mesmerizing bodily fragrance of the Empress. This filled his body with desire. He had seen the Empress' true appearance before, and he had even experienced intimate contact with her as well. This allowed his imagination to run wild. Don't let your imagination run wild, Empress Luanxing suddenly said in reprimand. Ling Han rolled his eyes. So, you even know what's going on in my mind? He smiled faintly, and said, okay, I won't think about that anymore. You're still thinking about that? Empress Luanxing said in accusation. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, oh, really? After seeing the seductive and charming side of this Empress, it was extremely hard for him to fear her anymore. His only complaint was that this Empress was mighty, seductive, pure, and stunningly beautiful, yet for some reason, didn't possess the adorable charm of a girl. If she were to flirt with him in a sweet and adorable voice, it was extremely likely that he wouldn't be able to control himself, even with his strong willpower. Empress Luanxing seethed with anger. This man actually showed her no respect at all. He had revolted. Revolted. She was fuming, and she felt an urge to suppress Ling Han. However, she was instantly surprised by her own thoughts. Her emotions had actually been affected by a dirty man? Crap, it was all over. After experiencing intimate contact with that man, she couldn't wipe him from her mind anymore. This result was partly because she had remained too pure before. Otherwise, why would Ling Han be etched so deeply in her mind? They hadn't done anything truly sexual, after all. The starship continued through the galaxy. They didn't experience any accidents or disasters that were common in the galaxy, and thus they arrived back at the joint peace planet in just a few days' time. Fortunately, neither the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire or the Jade Drop Majestic Empire had attacked the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire during the 2 years that Empress Luanxing had been absent. This was understandable, though. After all, how were they to know that Empress Luanxing had only just returned? However, Ling Han was feeling quite pissed off. This was because the Majestic Heavens Sect had already finished selecting disciples a year ago. In other words, he had already lost his opportunity to go. His 3 brothers, as well as Helian Tianyun and his disciple, Ding Ping, had all successfully entered the Majestic Heavens Sect and gone to the Flying Cloud planet. He had also heard that the Rain Emperor Ding Ping had been granted the status of a so-called Seed One. As such, they would enjoy special treatment and priority nurturing from the sect. In addition to them, Shui Yenyu had also successfully entered the sect. Although she wasn't especially outstanding, her age combined with her cultivation level was sufficient for her to qualify into the sect. It was just that she couldn't become a seed. The new disciples of the Majestic Heavens Sect were divided into 3 category seeds: outstanding disciples, and ordinary disciples. Thus, excluding the 2 seeds, the Rain Emperor and Ding Pinghlian Tianyun and Feng Piyun were both granted the status of outstanding disciple. Meanwhile, Murong Qing and Shui Yenyu were both ordinary disciples. As for Ling Han, where should he go next? Chapter 1130, Setting Off for the Majestic Heavens Sect. The Majestic Heavens Sect was extremely powerful. Although it didn't wish to dominate the surrounding planets, there was a great elite at the Eternal River tier watching over the sect. As such, it wasn't afraid to retaliate against those who provoked it. It could be said that the Majestic Heavens sect could casually reject to accept a disciple, even if it were Empress Luanxing who personally requested the Majestic Heavens sect to accept them. In any case, the relationship between Ling Han and Empress Luanxing wasn't that great anyway. Because Li Weiwei and Ji Yuner had refined some mountain river stones before, the combination of their age and their cultivation level qualified them as prodigies. Thus, they were also accepted into the Majestic Heavens sect as ordinary disciples. Almost all of Ling Han's friends had left the imperial capital and headed off to the Majestic Heavens sect. Ling Han started to mull over his next move. "Where is Ling Han?" A majestic and dignified voice sounded outside his residence. This was Chu Qiushue, the great commander of the Imperial Guards. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This great commander only answered to Empress Luanxing. The fact that she had come here signified that Empress Luanxing had issued an imperial decree. "TSK, how pompous. You embraced me and tried to sate your lust with my body, yet you're sending an underling to deliver a message now?" He opened his door and walked out, only to see that Chu Qiushue was dressed in a full suit of armor. There was a hint of might to her beauty, and she was like a radiant flower that blossomed among the army. It was a shame that this radiant flower only listened to the commands of Empress Luanxing. Ling Han had never heard any rumors about her liking a man, and it was extremely likely that she was mesmerized by the Empress, so much so that she had forgotten her own identity as a female. Ling Han clasped his hands in salute and said, "My respects to the great commander." As a fellow official of the Majestic Empire, he didn't have to kneel as long as Chu Qiushue didn't insist on it. There was a strange look in Chu Qiushue's eyes as she gazed at Ling Han. He was such an ordinary man, so how was he worthy of being the recipient of the Empress' imperial decree twice? So be it if he had been the recipient of the first imperial decree. The Empress had needed to borrow his achievements to put the officials and nobility back in their place. However, the imperial decree this time was completely for a private matter. When did he become acquainted with Her Majesty? No matter how Chu Qiushue guessed, she would never fathom that the Empress had actually lived with Ling Han for the entire 2 years that she had been missing. Moreover, there had been some extremely intimate moments between them. She would definitely go crazy if she were to learn of this. "Her Majesty asked me to deliver this to you." She handed a letter to him, and said, "This is a letter penned by Her Majesty for the 9th King. Her Majesty wants you to deliver this to the 9th King, and as long as the 9th King is willing, Her Majesty said that you can become her follower. That way, you can also cultivate in the Majestic Heavens sect." Ling Han was astonished by her words, so much so that he forgot to accept the letter. Only when Chu Qiushue coughed loudly did he come back to his senses and accept the letter. "I'll take my leave now." Chu Qiushue looked at Ling Han deeply before turning around to leave. She couldn't understand why Her Majesty wanted Ling Han to deliver the letter. Not only that, but Her Majesty had even sent her over to deliver the message. Ling Han was astonished because he knew that the 9th King had already been accepted as a disciple by the Majestic Heavens sect, and had already gone to the Flying Cloud planet. Moreover, that unreliable 9th King had actually been chosen as a seed. Although Empress Luanxing said that she wanted him to deliver a letter, she was, in effect, also opening a back door for him to enter the Majestic Heavens sect, albeit as a follower of the 9th King. In the Majestic Heavens sect, only seeds were allowed to have followers who could cultivate in the sect. Although these followers couldn't receive the resources of the sect, they could follow their masters and listen to the lectures on the great Tao given by great elites. Moreover, Venerable Trinity himself would occasionally give tips to the seeds. Thus, although followers were mere servants, an astounding number of prodigies still fought tooth and nail to win a spot of a follower. Empress Luanxing wasn't influential enough to have the Majestic Heavens sect break their rules and accept Ling Han as a disciple. However, she used another method to open a door for Ling Han. Ling Han sounded especially narcissistic as he mumbled to himself, "TSK, it looks like I'm quite charismatic, huh?" Even the Empress has been mesmerized by me. Should I accept this offer? Ling Han pondered over this for a moment. In the end, he decided to accept Empress Wan Xing's act of goodwill. His 3 brothers, his disciple, and his lover were all at the Majestic Heaven Sect. In addition, his enemies in Zhao Luan and Sha Yuan had also gone to the Majestic Heaven Sect. If he stayed in the imperial capital, what could he do apart from teasing the Empress? However, was it easy to tease the Empress? Ling Han made some preparations. He sold all of the alchemical pills he owned, and then used the true origin stones that he received to purchase a large number of materials. He couldn't give up on alchemy. The demonic power source was close to being used up, so it was impossible for him to maintain his rapid speed of cultivation. Thus, it was necessary for him to return to his old path of using alchemy to support cultivation. Half a month passed, and Ling Han decided to visit Old Man Su first. After that, he left the Joint Peace Planet and head to the Flying Cloud Planet on Notionless Saint's starship. Why couldn't he use his cloud-piercing shuttle? The lack of defensive formations was only part of the problem. The more important problem was that his cloud-piercing shuttle lacked galactic coordinates. There was no sense of up, down, left, or right in the vast galaxy, so how could one determine where they were headed? Galactical coordinates were the key to navigation. However, these coordinates would only be useful when paired with star charts. In addition, these star charts could only be displayed with the help of extremely large formations. Thus, it was basically impossible for small shuttles such as the cloud-piercing shuttle to navigate through the galaxy. If Ling Han were to attempt his journey with the cloud-piercing shuttle, there would only be one possible alchemy who would become lost in the vast galaxy. If he were lucky, perhaps he would make it to an unfamiliar planet after hundreds or even thousands of years. Of course, the condition was that he had enough true origin stones to fuel the cloud-piercing shuttle. Otherwise, the cloud-piercing shuttle would become no different from other ordinary shuttles. Ling Han steered the starship. This didn't require much technique or skill. There was only a formation, and the starship would fly by itself after the galactic coordinates were entered and the true origin stones were inserted. Only when the starship came across unexpected events such as asteroids or planetary explosions would one need to physically steer it away from the predetermined route. Ling Han entered the boundless galaxy. Most of the time, he would simply comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree. He would only leave the Black Tower occasionally in order to check on the situation and see whether there was any risk of accidents. It would take a long 3 months to get to the Flying Cloud Planet. Ling Han was currently sitting under the reincarnation tree, and Notionless Saint was imparting his cultivation knowledge to Qin Yi, Yuan Shenghe, and the others. He genuinely had nothing else to do right now, being a damaged soul and all. He obviously couldn't cultivate, so this was his way of passing time. Ling Han listened from the side. This was the knowledge of a saint, after all. Could the Majestic Heaven Sect compare to this? If he broke the news that there was a saint imparting his knowledge in the Black Tower, even Eternal River tier grade elites such as Venerable Trinity would beg to enter, to say nothing of Heavenly Body tier elites. It was impossible to describe the Great Tao with mere words. However, Notionless Saint had been a supreme elite once, so he naturally knew how to guide his students. This was analogous to how a black hole couldn't be seen, but one could succeed in proving its existence through observing the light rays and celestial bodies that it absorbed. The guidance provided by Notionless Saint was similar to this. Through his profound yet simple explanations, Qin Yi and the others were able to attain all kinds of comprehensions. One had to remember that they were comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree. Perhaps they couldn't grasp a concept in just one day, but what if they were given a year? Or even 10 years? Brat, even if I obtain a physical body in the future, I'm still going to cultivate in this place of yours, Notionless Saint said. It's an unparalleled treasure land. Under the reincarnation tree, 1 day's worth of cultivation was equivalent to 1 year's worth. Thus, even saints couldn't resist the appeal of cultivating here. No problem. Ling Han said with a nod. If Notionless Saint could recover fully, Ling Han would have gained another powerful helper, even if Notionless Saint were only a small saint. The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't help but admire and venerate his master even more. He had obtained the services of a saint just like that. If they were in the netherworld, this would be equivalent to obtaining the help of a demon master. He involuntarily tried to wag his tail. However, he was in human form right now, so there was no tail for him to wag. This displeased him greatly. He actually wasn't a dog anymore. How infuriating. Chapter 1131, Pinnacle Level of Mountain River Tier. The starship sailed soundlessly in the universe. Silent and peaceful. Shwa, all of a sudden, a sword light flashed past. It was incredibly bright, and condensed frightening divine patterns. In that instant, it lit up the surrounding stars, and even a distant sun paled in comparison. As this sword light swept past, the divine chains of regulations moved, and a ripple formed. Pung! Unsurprisingly, the starship was instantly smashed into smithereens. This was a small starship, and its defenses could only reach the peak stage of Sun-Moon tier, at most. Meanwhile, that strike previously was shockingly at the level of Heavenly Body tier. A human figure appeared in thin air, entwined all over with the air of primal chaos. It was indistinguishable whether it was even male or female, a tall or short figure. He stood in the galaxy, and began a close observation. He seemed to be still worried, and examined every broken piece of the starship to confirm that there was not the slightest sliver of life in them. After this, he waved out a hand, and summoned out a small starship, which he then steered and left. In the galaxy, the ripples returned to their initial peaceful state, and returned to the state of dead silence. After a day, that small starship actually appeared once more. After circling around once in the area, it finally left. How cautious! Ling Han uttered darkly inside the Black Tower. When the starship had been attacked, he just happened to be in the Black Tower, and so did not even have to make the move to hide. When he found out this assaulter was an extremely careful person, he did not rush to leave. Instead, he patiently waited in here. True enough, the attacker made an unexpected return. This kind of caution was truly fearful. "Brat, you seem to have offended a great many people," Notionless Saint said. He had already heard from Ling Han about how the starship had been attacked. "It is not seem, but a fact." Ling Han cracked a grin. "However, not too long after, would be able to push back, and seize every single person that wants to harm me. Then, I shall let them suffer the consequences of their own actions." These words seemed very boastful, but Notionless Saint could not find any way to refute him. With a precious treasure like the reincarnation tree, Ling Han was indeed right to be proud. Wasn't it clear that even he was moved, and desired to comprehend Tao underneath this tree? Ling Han was deducing the identity of his attacker. It could be the Dark Night Hall, and could also be others. However, there were only so many elites of Heavenly Body tier on the Joint Peace Planet. As long as he possessed enough power, he could completely seek out these people. After identifying their respective aura, he would be able to confirm their identity. Every single elite possessed a unique presence that belonged to them alone, and it was very, very hard for another to imitate it. Still, how should we now go to the Flying Cloud Planet? Ling Han was feeling awkward. After having lost the galactic coordinates, it was really like he had entered into a colossal maze. Furthermore, there was not the slightest bit of upgrade, and he could only depend on blind guessing completely. The price of this was time, naturally. Perhaps when he really stepped on the land of the Flying Cloud Planet, it would be a few decades or even a few centuries later. No matter what, I have to try my luck. Previously, the starship had already traveled for more than 2 months, and was not too far away from the Flying Cloud Planet, so there should be a chance. Ling Han took out the cloud-piercing shuttle, and tried his best to identify the correct direction before beginning his intergalactic journey. This time, he was really traveling blindly. A month later, the Flying Cloud Planet was still far from reach, and he had completely no idea where it even was. Ling Han sighed repeatedly. He had not relaxed throughout this month, and added with the 2 months that he had traveled previously, the majority of his time was spent comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree to accumulate comprehension and form the fifth mountain river. Now, his comprehension was already very deep, but on the matter of finding the flying cloud planet, he seemed to have slipped into a dead end. Another half a month later, his comprehension was already adequate. After all, Notionless Saint was by his side to supply consultation, and he also had the support of the demonic power source. He was about to break through. Not to Sun Moon tier, but the pinnacle of Mountain River tier. Was it fast? Not in the slightest. It should be known that Ling Han possessed the reincarnation tree, and from the moment they left the large galactic tomb, he had already comprehended over 100 years' worth. If he could still manage to comprehend the secrets of forming the fifth mountain river with this, he could not possibly do so in the future. Ling Han put away the cloud-piercing shuttle, and stood proudly in the galaxy. Hong, long, long. The heavenly tribulation arrived as expected. This was a power that was most omnipotent. Nothing could possibly prevent the arrival of the tribulation. Ling Han sighed. Only a year had passed, and he would have to experience a hell-like torture again. Godly bones, shatter. He took the initiative to shatter his godly bones to let them be tempered under the heavenly tribulation. Level 4 and Level 5 godly metal appeared to only have the gap of a single level, but even a 9-star genius at the peak stage of Mountain River tier would not be able to match a Sun Moon tier cultivator that had just broken through. Similarly, there existed a massive gulf between Level 4 and Level 5 godly metal. Previously, Ling Han's physique could only be considered in between Level 4 and Level 5 godly metal, and only after experience another tempering like such would he be able to reach the level of Mountain River tier. He nodded internally. If he did not cultivate to the pinnacle of all 5 major tiers, his physique would not be able to reach the strongest level in existence. Just thinking of that was too frightening. Even if he was weak, even the Saint King could do nothing against him. However, the indestructible Heaven's Scroll had not been his creation, so even if he was the second person to cultivate this cultivate, what about the first? That elite must have died, which was why the Black Tower had been searching for a new master. The creator must have cultivated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to the pinnacle, yet he had still died. This meant that the pinnacle of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll was not the pinnacle of cultivation, which was why it could be shattered by a stronger power. Ling Han gathered his scattered thoughts. He was still very far away from the peak of cultivation, so there was still no need for him to consider such matters as of yet. All the godly bones in his body were shattered. The smaller the particles they had shattered into, the more complete the tempering from the heavenly tribulation would be. There would definitely still be a difference for 2 masses of level 5 godly metal, just like how the low extreme could still be categorized into early stage, middle stage, late stage, and peak stage. If he was going to this, he would do his best, or he would not do it at all. Hong, long, long. Thunder rang out loudly in the void. The regulations of heaven and earth in the galaxy were very weak, and even Mountain River tier cultivators were capable of flight. Furthermore, the space was very easily destroyed. With the havoc wreaked by lightning bolts as long as 30,000 meters, this place seemed to have become an incredibly bright sea of lightning. Even Ling Han felt that the tribulation this time round was out of the ordinary, and was much more powerful compared to the times before. The fifth mountain river, the true pinnacle, was not allowed by the heavens. After half a day, the heavenly tribulation disappeared, and peace resumed. Meanwhile, Ling Han was standing quietly, and learning through experience. Unlike previously, his power had not soared. Instead, a door had been opened to him, allowing him to further improve his power, spiking it up to the height of 7, 8, 9, or even 10 stars. But how many stars he could actually reach would depend on his natural talent and comprehension abilities and how far he could cultivate the fifth mountain river. In the distance, a weak light flickered, and he saw a starship heading straight for him. Subconsciously, Ling Han thought of hiding in the Black Tower, but he immediately realized that this was not that attacker from before, but rather his savior. Most probably, the commotion caused by the heavenly tribulation previously had been too large, and thus attracted this starship, which purposely turned around to see what was going on. Great, great, now he finally didn't have to run around madly in the galaxy any further. Ling Han cracked a grin. Good news really followed one after another. He drew out a change appearance pill, which he then consumed. Chapter 1132, Majestic Heaven Sect. The starship arrived near Ling Han, but did not stop. It merely slowed down. When the starship was started, it would expend the largest number of true origin stones. Thus, even if they were willing to allow Ling Han to come aboard, there was completely no need for them to deliberately stop the starship. They merely had to slow down. Ling Han shot over. The starship did not stretch out its defenses, but this was very normal. With no danger anywhere, what was the point of pulling out the defense shield? It would be a complete waste of true origin stones. He landed on the deck, and there were already 3 men waiting for him there. "How may I address you?" one man asked. He was an elite of Sun Moon tier, his aura powerful, forming a suppression in terms of pure level. At first, he was very cautious, but when he sensed that Ling Han's aura was only of Mountain River tier, he immediately relaxed. Ling Han clasped his fists together in greeting and said, "My name is Han Lin. Previously, I encountered galactic pirates and managed to fortunately escape. However, now that I have lost my starship, I am unable to progress to my destination. Thankfully, you all came across me and saved me." Since that assaulter thought he had succeeded, why shouldn't he temporarily keep his identity secret, and gain an environment in which he could be allowed to peacefully grow? "So it is young friend Han." The man nodded. Though he was not sure of the authenticity of Ling Han's words, if he claimed that he had been purposely waiting for them here, and laid a trap or something, he was not about to believe that. After all, the galaxy was too massive, so who would be able to grasp the ship route of another? "Where are you heading to, young friend?" he asked again. "Flying Cloud Planet," Ling Han replied. The man couldn't help but smile, and said, "Then it is really coincidental. We are also heading to the Flying Cloud Planet, so we shall bring you along with us, young friend." "Many thanks," Ling Han quickly said. In this immortal realm, where power meant everything, it was actually very rare for an elite to be amicable to others. The man waved him off, and had one of his subordinates bring Ling Han below deck to rest. Ling Han exchanged conventional greetings with that person, and found out that this was the trade ship of the Mo clan. That large man previously was named Mo Gu, and was a core person of the Mo clan. The Mo clan was based on the southern plentiful planet, but because it was dealing in the intergalactic trading of goods, they also had a branch on various major planets and in major majestic empires, which caused the standing of the Mo clan to be very extraordinary. If the southern plentiful majestic empire wanted to harm them, all they had to do was switch location, and begin turning their new home into a new base. On this trip, they were delivering a large amount of goods to the Flying Cloud Planet. It was really a coincidence. They had only veered off their initial flight route to take a look because Ling Han's heavenly tribulation had attracted them. Ling Han made a note of this favor secretly in his heart. When they lent him a helping hand, they might not have thought of asking him to repay the favor, but if he was really ungrateful, then he was really not a man. He had indeed veered far off from the flight route from the Joint Peace Planet to the Flying Cloud Planet. However, his luck was not too bad, as he was not too far away from the Flying Cloud Planet. Thus, they merely had to travel for about another 7 days, and the starship would be able to land on the Flying Cloud Planet. Naturally, it was impossible that Mo Gu, as an elite of Sun Moon tier, would take note of a minor character like Ling Han. In the following 7 days, he had not paid Ling Han a visit, and only when the starship landed, and they disembarked, did Ling Han finally see him again. He once again expressed his thanks to the latter. Ling Han bought a map in the city, and, according to the map, realized that he was not far off from the Majestic Heaven Sect. There were actually only 2 majestic empires on the Flying Cloud Planet, the Four Seas Majestic Empire and the Great Heaven Majestic Empire. Furthermore, the territories of these 2 majestic empires added together were not as large as the territory occupied by the Majestic Heaven Sect. There was nothing to be done. Though Venerable Trinity had clearly expressed that they had no interest in taking over the world, it was a fact that the Majestic Heavens sect had occupied such an expansive territory. How could the two majestic empires dare to attack them for the purpose of obtaining more territory? On the other hand, it was already quite good that the majestic empires were allowed to exist. Moreover, if the territory of an Eternal River tier elite was even smaller than Heavenly Body tier, how could it be acceptable? Thus, the current situation was something that all sides could accept and were satisfied with. Ling Han was presently in the Great Heaven Majestic Empire, and there was about a month's journey from here to the gates of the Majestic Heaven Sect, the Heavenly Wind Mountain. And this was taking into account the speed of the cloud-piercing shuttle. If it was him using his own legs to travel, that would take half a year at least. Let's set out. Ling Han took out the cloud-piercing shuttle, and set off towards the Majestic Heaven Sect. 7 days later, he had entered into the territory of the Majestic Heaven Sect, but it was only after another 20-odd days that he finally arrived at the mountain gates of the Majestic Heaven Sect. No wonder it was called the Majestic Heaven Sect. In front of him, there was a mountain peak so high that it towered into the clouds. Even if he activated the Eye of Truth, he could not see the peak. It was probably tens of thousands of meters tall, at least. This was the main peak of the Heavenly Wind Mountains, Cloud-Piercing Peak. Aside from the main peak, there were 7 other subsidiary peaks. Similarly, they were extremely tall, but they were appropriately located, so there was not a single mountain peak that was as tall as another. Now that he had arrived here, he could not travel around with the cloud-piercing shuttle as he liked. Ling Han steered the cloud-piercing shuttle into a descent, and put it away. Then, he began to travel on foot. This was an important territory of the Majestic Heaven Sect, and there were a great many places where no entry was allowed, and where various restrictions were set up. There were also disciples of the sect responsible for regular patrols. Ling Han was not here to swindle or cheat, so he had absolutely no intention of using the Black Tower to enter into forbidden territory. Instead, he traveled along the main path, and arrived at the foot of a subsidiary peak. After he made some queries, he found out that outsiders usually were not allowed to trespass into the main peak and 7 subsidiary peaks. However, it was a different case in these few days. There were a few seated disciples in the sect that were currently recruiting followers, which had attracted a great many people to come and apply for the position. Previously, it had already been explained. Only seated disciples were qualified to recruit followers, and if one became a follower, aside from being unable to gain any resources for cultivation, there was actually no difference in their treatment and the treatment of official disciples. They could even listen from the sidelines when the seated disciple was being taught by Venerable Trinity. How massive was that kind of lure? Discounting those who did not manage to enter into the Majestic Heaven Sect, even inside the Majestic Heaven Sect itself, there were a great many ordinary disciples that strived with their all to become the followers of some seated disciples. Moreover, it was definite that every seed would definitely become a supreme elite. They would be in existence at the consummate level of Sun-Moon tier at least, since the barrier to the Heavenly Body tier was really too hard to breach. However, wasn't the consummate level of Sun-Moon tier awesome enough? If they could rely on their help and stay by the side of such elites, it would be of extremely great help to their future development. In short, the foot of one of the subsidiary peaks, White Cloud Peak, was currently packed with people. They all longed to become the followers of one of the seeds. Every seed could only possess 3 followers at most. Naturally, that was not enough to satisfy the masses, and it was something that they would be fighting desperately over. Stand aside, stand aside. A commotion was heard from behind them. 4 men were clearing the path, and behind them, there was a gloomy-looking young man. His vitality was strong, so he was indeed very young, but his cultivation level had shockingly reached the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, which was very astonishing. Who is this? Being so arrogant and overbearing, could it be a key disciple? Someone nearby asked. You don't even know who he is? Why should I know him? He is Zhang Tong, Lord Yang Hao's follower. What, Yang Hao? You mean that super genius who had used a mere 600 years to reach Sun-Moon tier, that Lord Yang Hao? Of course. Hiss. Still, however awesome, it is Lord Yang, so what does it have to do with him? You don't know, right? Zhang Tong had once been a key disciple of the Majestic Heaven Sect, and purposely surrendered this identity to follow Lord Yang. At the time, many people said he was dumb, but what about now? There are even some seated prodigies that wish to follow Lord Yang. Unfortunately, Lord Yang is completely disdainful of them. What, is it real? As they spoke, those 4 people in charge of clearing the path had walked to stand behind Ling Han. The others had all obediently allowed them to pass, which made Ling Han appear very prominent. Chapter 1133, An Arrogant Follower. Brat, didn't you hear us tell you to get lost? The 4 men humphed coldly. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, You're quite pompous for people with weak abilities. What? One man walked forward. Do you have any idea who my young master is? Oh, who is it? Ling Han asked, smiling. He really couldn't care less. Zhang Tong, young Master Tong, this man declared proudly as if he himself was that Zhang Tong. Ling Han gave an oh, and continued, so going by that logic, you are the lapdog of a lapdog, the so-called second dog? You, the man pointed furiously at Ling Han. Are you tired of living? Oh, so this is how the Majestic Heaven Sect treats guests? Ling Han asked. Wrong, we are not the disciples of the Majestic Heaven Sect, and thus have no need to be restricted by the rules of the sect, this man said sinisterly. Then, he snapped his fingers. Brothers, let us give this guy a profound lesson. He. The other 3 men stepped out, each staring at Ling Han like they were hungry wolves that had caught sight of a little rabbit. After Ling Han had formed his 5th mountain river tier, his aura became reserved. His whole person became as profoundly deep as the ocean, and it was very difficult to distinguish exactly how strong he was. Furthermore, it had already been a month ago since he had broken through to the pinnacle of mountain river tier. Presently, his power had advanced to 7 stars. 7 stars of power above the peak of mountain river tier, what kind of notion was that? He took a look at Zhang Tong, and asked, These dogs of yours are barking madly, and you are not planning to take them to heel? Beat all the teeth out of his mouth. Zhang Tong commanded icily, his expression changing. At first, he had not cared about Ling Han. So what if they had beaten this kind of minor character? He could not even bother to give him a second look. So what if he was arrogant? As a follower of Lord Yang Hao, why couldn't he be arrogant? It had to be known that Venerable Trinity had the intention to take Yang Hao as a personal disciple. If Yang Hao actually became the personal disciple of an elite of the Eternal River tier, so what if he decided to do as he liked in the Majestic Heaven Sect? He. The 4 lapdogs all laughed coldly. Zhang Tong himself was an overbearing person, and they were used to acting arrogant by his side. They had absolutely no idea what the word reserved meant. Those around them quickly stepped back, fearing that they would be dragged in. That was Zhang Tong, who would dare to bother with other people's business like this? Furthermore, they were not disciples of the Majestic Heaven Sect, so what basis did they have to interfere in this matter? Humph, what intolerable bullies. Just at this moment, a woman in green leaped out of the crowd. You are all merely a bunch of lackeys, and you still dare to be so arrogant. Zhang Tong took one look at her, and couldn't help but look stunned. She was actually an exquisite beauty. Her hair fell like waterfall, and she had a complexion fairer than snow. Her features were incredibly delicate, especially those large eyes. It was as if they could speak, and were filled with the mischief of a young girl. His heart throbbed involuntarily, and he asked, Miss, how may I address you? What do you care who I am? I cannot bear to see bullies who like to bully others as they like, the beauty in green declared with her head held high like a proud swan. Junior sister. Another man forced his way out. His figure was tall, and he was amazingly sturdy. However, he did not appear overbearing. Instead, he gave off a cowering vibe. On one side, he bowed repeatedly towards Zhang Tong and his 4 lackeys as he said, "Apologies, apologies. This is my junior sister disciple. She is rash in her speech and actions, so please do not fault her. Please bear with her." As everyone watched this, they all shook their heads secretly. The personalities of these 2 fellow disciples were really 2 extremes of the spectrum. One disdained evil like it was her personal enemy, while the other was cowardly and timid. Yet Zhang Tong smirked coldly. "With just an apology and asking me to bear with her, you think you can stay out of this matter?" "That. Young Master Zhang, what do you want to do?" the sturdy man asked. "Since you have offended me, you naturally have to make amends and apologize. Why don't we go have a drink and chat at the heavenly distant restaurant later?" Zhang Tong's eyes were fixed on the beauty in green, his heart itching. The masses naturally understood in a flash. As men, how could they not read between the lines? Zhang Tong wanted to have that woman. This, the sturdy man was hesitant. "Senior brother, he is only a lackey. Why do we have to be afraid of him?" the beauty in green asked, fuming. "Junior sister, how many times have I told you? Don't cause trouble, don't cause trouble." Sigh. The sturdy man sighed, but just as the masses thought that he was about to compromise, he suddenly boldly went into an attack posture and declared, "No one can humiliate my junior sister." At this instant, he really had an awe-inspiring presence, without the slightest bit of cowardice from before. Zhang Tong couldn't help but laugh loudly, and said, "So it turns out you're an idiot. Apprehend him." He stretched out a finger to point at the large man. He was sure that as long as this person was apprehended, this beauty in green would definitely be his to order around as he desired. Now that the 4 lackeys had received their command, they would naturally not have the time to deal with Ling Han. Instead, they pounced at the sturdy man like wolves. Previously, the tall man had looked like he was afraid of trouble, but when it really came to a point when there was no retreat, he revealed his fierce side. With a shake of his fists, he slammed them together. Suddenly, a terrifying wave of power was created. His fists swelled. Previously, they had only been the size of clay basins. Though they were still big, it was still within normal range, but now, they were at least 3 times bigger than the head. They had also turned an ash color, flickering with a metallic light. Wang, his arms also waved, like they were waves of water. The ripples continued from the wrist to his shoulder, and after every ripple, there would be another divine pattern added to his fists, and they became even stronger than before. What kind of martial arts technique was this? It was quite interesting. Ling Han watched from the sidelines. He was in no rush to interfere. The 4 lackeys had already pounced over, and they each made their move. Peng, 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 peng. The sturdy man delivered a punch at an incredibly fast pace. He actually managed to unleash 4 punches in a single instant, and exchanged a blow with each of the 4 lackeys. He seemed to have become a spring, and was filled with elasticity. Thus, after he had shot out a punch, he made use of the rebound to quickly deliver the second punch. Ling Han watched closely. With every punch, one of the divine patterns on the tall man's fists would disappear, and his battle prowess would decline slightly. Interesting, the power of his punches would be weakened with the increasing number of times he delivered punches. However, he only had to pause for a while, and the power of his punches would again become stronger. His battle prowess fluctuated indefinitely. The sturdy man's cultivation level was in the late stage of the low extreme of Mountain River tier. Out of those 4 lackeys, 3 were on the same level as he, and the last was even stronger as he had reached the peak stage of the low extreme. Hence, the first punch from the large man was finally aimed at that person in the peak of the low extreme. This was his strongest blow. After a while, not only those watching from the sidelines could see everything clearly, but realization also dawned on even those 4 henchmen. Speed up the attack, don't allow him to have a chance to recover the power in his punch. The attacks of the 4 came faster and faster, causing the sturdy man to deliver punches as much as they could. In this manner, even if the divine patterns on his fists would recover automatically, the rate of recovery would be far from catching up to the rate in which they were expended, so his attack power would naturally decline. I will not allow you to bully my senior brother. The beauty in green drew her sword, anger filling her expression. Chapter 1134, Ling Han's reaction. Miss, everyone's only sparring. There's no need to make such a fuss, Zhang Tong said with a smile. He pressed his hand outward, and the beauty in green trembled uncontrollably as if she had been struck by a heavy pressure. She was barely able to maintain her balance. Zhang Tong was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, while the beauty in green was only at the early stage of the low extreme. The difference in their cultivation level was like an insurmountable gulf. Junior sister, the sturdy man cried in alarm. However, the 4 lackeys had already found a way to counter his battle technique and thus suppress him. That being the case, how could he help the beauty in green? Is this really the Majestic Heaven's Sect? Someone murmured softly. How can their disciples be so arrogant? There's nothing we can do about this. Whose fault is it that we're not disciples of the Majestic Heaven Sect? Even if the Majestic Heaven Sect wants to manage things, they'll only manage affairs internal to the sect. Sigh, I can't bear to watch on. Say, the most detestable person is actually that brat. It was clearly him who caused this matter, yet he's standing there and watching on as if this has nothing to do with him. That's right, that brat is abominable. Many people directed their anger at Ling Han. They felt that he was an ungrateful wretch. Those 2 had clearly stepped out to help him, yet how did he react? He casually walked aside and acted as if the fight had nothing to do with him. Ling Han naturally heard their comments. However, he simply ignored them and acted as if he hadn't heard anything. He wanted to gauge the potential of the sturdy man. He wanted to see whether he could find an opportunity to turn the tables on the lackeys. If he couldn't, he would be nothing more than just a reckless brute. Junior sister. The sturdy man continued to shout. His concern for her couldn't be more obvious. Senior brother, don't mind me, the beauty in green said with much difficulty. She was under immense pressure, and just saying this sentence caused her breathing to become labored. The sturdy man was enraged, and his black hair instantly stood on ends. A golden halo rose from beneath his feet before surging above his head and vanishing into the air. However, an additional 10 divine patterns materialized on his fists. His power climbed to an incredible level. Pang, 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 pang. The 4 lackeys wailed in agony as they were instantly sent flying. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. He was rendered a bit speechless by the sturdy man's actions. He had wanted to see how the sturdy man would deal with the desperate situation. In Ling Han's opinion, battles couldn't be won purely through brute strength. However, the sturdy man had proven otherwise in this case, unleashing his brute strength to the extreme. If increasing his divine patterns by 1 at a time wasn't enough, he would increase them by 10 at a time. Doing this would definitely place a huge burden on the sturdy man. However, he appeared especially mighty at this moment, and there was almost an aura of invincibility about him. Release my junior sister, the sturdy man roared. He charged toward Zhang Tong. Humph, what a fool. Zhang Tong raised his arm and made a pressing action toward the sturdy man. Wang. His origin power formed into countless lengths of chains that intertwined into a net and enveloped the sturdy man. The difference in their cultivation level was far too large. In fact, even Ling Han would be no match for a consummate level cultivator if he were suppressed back to the low extreme. Only 10-star geniuses would be able to achieve such a feat. They were freaks, and their battle prowess would be on par with the late stage of the consummate level once they advanced to the low extreme. Senior brother. Senior brother, the beauty in green cried in alarm. Don't worry, I won't hurt him too much. Zhang Tong chuckled and said, Miss, can you tell me your name now? The beauty in green glowered at Zhang Tong, an unyielding look on her face. Zhang Tong wasn't angered by her answer, or rather the lack thereof. He turned to the 4 lackeys who had just crawled up, and said, Beat that person however he just beat you for. A sinister smile appeared on their faces, and they answered, "Understood, young Master Tong." "Don't." The beauty in green's expression changed drastically. "How can this person be so despicable?" Zhang Tong laughed loudly, and said, "Miss, your name." This beauty in green was clearly a young lady who had barely any life experience. Thus, he naturally had a stranglehold on her. I am called." The beauty in green kept her eyes wide open in an attempt to stop her tears from falling. She felt extremely vexed and angry. "Ha!" Ling Han finally stepped forward, and said, "How can this lady's name be revealed to such a lowlife? Won't that be an insult to this lady's name?" He stopped the beauty in green from speaking. Zhang Tong's expression darkened. He had already gained full control of the situation, yet his rhythm was actually ruined by this brat. He humphed coldly, and said, "What are you four waiting for? Hurry up and kill him." He squinted his eyes as a malicious killing intent rose from his body. Did they really think that he didn't dare to kill them? How naive. The Majestic Heaven's Sect wasn't a charity, and these people were more so not disciples of the sect. As such, their deaths would be completely meaningless. The four lackeys had just suffered a beating at the hands of the sturdy man, and this had left them feeling ashamed and humiliated. However, the appearance of Ling Han gave them a chance to win their face back. They didn't think that Ling Han was strong, and the four of them slowly encircled him. This brat is finally showing some backbone. It's useless, though. So what if he can defeat those four people? Zhang Tong's already at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. How many people in the younger generation can defeat him? Indeed. The genuine prodigies have already been accepted into the Majestic Heaven Sect. Moreover, Zhang Tong had been a key disciple back in the day, and he was also a prodigy among prodigies. When battling against those at the same cultivation level, only the seeds were able to defeat him. Everyone shook their heads in disappointment. The result of this battle was already decided. However, who told this brat to be so blind that he challenged Zhang Tong? Everything would have been fine if he had just moved aside for Zhang Tong. It wasn't as if he would lose a chunk of his flesh or anything. The four lackeys each lunged over from a different direction. Their expressions were sinister, and it was clear that they all had a large amount of blood on their hands. Ling Han shook his head. He then raised a hand and snapped his fingers. Xiao, 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 xiao. Four bursts of sword chi surged outward. Although he had simply formed these using his fingers, these four bursts of sword chi possessed a supreme might that made it feel as if heaven and earth were collapsing. Ling Han had used the power of regulations. While he had been in the large tomb, he had received inspiration from the sword strike that he had needed to decipher. He had pondered over it under the reincarnation tree, and now that so much time had passed, he had naturally developed a deeper understanding of it gradually. Now, he only needed to snap his fingers, and his attacks would be filled with overwhelming sword intent. Not only that, but it would also contain the power of regulations. Pa, 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 pa. There were four crisp cracks, and the heads of the four lackeys exploded at almost exactly the same moment. Their divine sense was instantly ripped to shreds. A deathly silence fell over the surroundings. This youth looked to be fairly gentle and easygoing, yet his attack had been incredibly resolute and deadly. In fact, he hadn't even given the lackeys a chance to beg for their lives. Perhaps these four lackeys were completely insignificant. However, who was Zhang Tong? He was Yang Hao's follower and someone who had once been a key disciple. He could stay by Yang Hao's side, and as a result, he could occasionally listen to lectures on the great Tao given by elites. Could his battle prowess not be terrifying? Although he hadn't reached the Sun-Moon tier yet, he was definitely one of the strongest cultivators in the Mountain River tier. Sigh. Everyone shook their heads in pity. This youth was far too rash, and he had clearly not considered the consequences. Initially, he had every opportunity to protect himself. If he hadn't gone too far, Zhang Tong wouldn't necessarily go after him himself. But now? If Zhang Tong didn't kill Ling Han, what face would he have? Humph. I underestimated you. Zhang Tong said coldly. There was a piercing look in his eyes. He had sensed Ling Han's powerful strength the moment that he attacked. He definitely wasn't as ordinary as he looked. However, Zhang Tong was unafraid. He had been accepted as a key disciple before, and he had possessed a power of 5, almost 6 stars then. He was more so a follower of Yang Hao now, and he was thus able to listen to the explanations of Tao provided by great elites. As such, his battle prowess had naturally grown even stronger. He now possessed a battle prowess of 7 stars. Who could challenge him? Chapter 1135. There's always someone stronger. You're quite courageous, huh? You even dare to kill someone from the Majestic Heaven Sect. Zhang Tong said in a baleful voice. Ling Han shook his head while laughing loudly, and said, Wrong. You're merely a lackey, and the people I killed were lapdogs of a lackey. So, what does this have to do with the Majestic Heaven Sect? Zhang Tong faltered for a moment. Just then, it was his lackey who had said that the 5 of them weren't from the Majestic Heaven Sect. That being the case, the rules of the Majestic Heaven Sect naturally didn't apply to them. As such, what did it matter if they killed others? Now, however, Ling Han was using the words of his own lackey against him. It was just that Ling Han was far too unvirtuous. Every sentence he spoke was filled with the words lackey and lapdog. He stared at Ling Han and said, You're correct. If one is powerful enough, they can naturally do as they wish. However, if I decide to act, how many strikes of mine do you think you can block? Oh. Are you very powerful? Ling Han picked his ears. He appeared as relaxed as he could be. Zhang Tong humphed and said, I'm at the peak stage of the mountain river tier, and my power can surpass 5 stars. My battle prowess can surpass 7 stars. What? The surrounding onlookers clasped their heads in shock. Was this even possible? Even 5-star geniuses only existed in the legends. Yet, Zhang Tong claimed that just his power alone could already surpass 5 stars. His battle prowess was even more insane, and was able to surpass a whopping 7 stars. If this were true, why was he still a follower? He was definitely talented enough to become a seed. However, Ling Han knew that cultivation was like rowing a boat upstream. It would float backward if it didn't advance. Perhaps Zhang Tong possessed a power of 5 stars at the moment. However, there was no guarantee that he would be able to maintain this power of 5 stars after advancing to the Sun-Moon tier. Perhaps his power would fall to 4 stars, or maybe even 3 stars. This was similar to how Ling Han had formed 5 mountains and rivers and could attain a pinnacle power of 10 stars. If he didn't form 5 suns and moons after advancing to the Sun-Moon tier, his power would end up falling to 9 or even 8 stars. If he were only able to form 4 heavenly bodies at the heavenly body tier, his power would continue to fall, perhaps going down to 7 or even 6 stars. Thus, the number of stars that one could surpass wasn't set in stone. Moreover, the higher one's cultivation level was, the harder it would be to maintain a high number of stars. This was because keeping the same number of stars would require one to cultivate to an extremely high level in each major tier. A power of 5 stars? Ling Han said with a faint smile. A power of 5 stars was indeed very powerful. However, he had already possessed a power of 6 stars before forming 5 mountains and rivers. Right now, his power was at an astonishing 7 stars. Although there was only a difference of 1 star, there was a huge leap in quality going from the 6th to 7th star. This qualitative change could only be achieved if one formed 5 mountains and rivers. This was similar to how the last 3 stars in the Shattering Void tier could only be bestowed by heaven and earth. Are you afraid now? Zhang Tong chuckled coldly, and said, Kneel down and kowtow to me, and pledge yourself to me as your master. In light of the fact that cultivation is not easy, I'll take pity on you and accept you as my servant. Ling Han shook his head, and said, you're too full of yourself. Fine, you can attack me now. I'm done speaking nonsense with trash such as yourself. I need to dispose of you quickly lest you delay my proper matters. Pooh. The onlookers almost spat their tongues out in astonishment. You're already in such a perilous situation, yet you're still running your mouth? That's a 7-star genius. He's basically invincible in the Mountain River tier. Although such a prodigy is only a follower, just how prodigious is Yang Hao? Is he an 8-star genius? Or perhaps a 9-star genius? 10-star genius? You're seeking death. Zhang Tong finally couldn't hold back anymore. He raised his right hand and lashed out at Ling Han. He had only thrown this strike casually as he was far too confident in himself. He was sure that this strike would end everything. Ling Han simply snapped his fingers again. Xiao! A burst of sword light surged outward, so dazzling that it illuminated the heavens. Zhang Tong clasped his hand as he retreated. Blood dripped from his fingers and pitter-pattered onto the ground. The onlookers almost spat their tongues out again. They were completely lost for words. Zhang Tong was a 7-star genius, one that had reached the peak stage of the Mountain River tier, no less. Yet, he had actually been wounded by a simple snap of that person's fingers. How could they accept this? Why you? Zhang Tong was stunned. He raised his right hand, only to see that a hole had been made in it. The sight of this bloody hole sent a harrowing chill through his body. Although his strike had only been casual, Ling Han's strike had also been similarly casual. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like his opponent had used any secret technique. However, the might of his opponent's strike had been far above that of his. How can such a frightening prodigy appear on such a day? Haven't the top prodigies already been accepted into the sect? Zhang Tong was indeed arrogant and domineering, but was he brainless? Of course not. He had been certain that no super genius would appear today, and as such, it was his chance to act haughty and domineering. One had to remember that he had once been a key disciple. Moreover, he was already at the peak stage of the Mountain River tier. It could be said that even many of the seeds were no match for him. The difference in their cultivation level was too large, after all. However, he had come across a powerful opponent now. You what? Haven't you learned your lesson yet? Ling Han's voice was cold, and he continued, in fact, there's no need for you to learn any lesson, because you won't live to see the future. Bullsh *T. Zhang Tong roared loudly as he slapped his chest. A soft green glow appeared, and a small green cauldron appeared within the light. However, this green cauldron immediately started to spin and grow larger, eventually transforming into a giant cauldron that measured 30 meters in height. Suppress him! Zhang Tong roared. Tens of thousands of green aura strands instantly flowed down from the green cauldron and surged toward Ling Han. Each strand of green aura transformed into a large snake that weighed as much as a mountain. They hadn't reached Ling Han yet, but the indescribable might that they exuded was already causing the land to tremor. This was a remarkable god tool. Emerald Cliff Cauldron, someone exclaimed. This is Yang Hao's supreme treasure. He actually bestowed it upon Zhang Tong? What? Emerald Cliff Cauldron? That's a Sun-Moon tier god tool. It's rumored to be a level 8 god tool, and it ranks highly even when compared to other Sun-Moon tier god tools. No, that isn't the Emerald Cliff Cauldron. It's only a replica. Otherwise, would we still be able to stand here and spectate the battle? You're right. If it were the genuine Emerald Cliff Cauldron, just a strand of its aura would be enough to suppress all of us. Even if it's only a replica, it's still extremely terrifying. It can probably rank among the top few Mountain River tier god tools. Can't you see that Zhang Tong is even using his precious blood to nurture it? This means that he can't control it using his own raw power. He has to feed it his blood, and as such allow the god tool to become a part of him. Only by doing so can he use this god tool. That person is going to suffer. Boom! The large snakes surged down with the green light, and it was as if countless great stars were crashing down from the sky. The ground continued to shake violently, and the commotion that it caused was petrifying. Zhang Tong smiled coldly. That brat was indeed powerful, had actually forced him to activate the replica Emerald Cliff Cauldron. However, everything was about to end. What mountain river tier cultivator would be able to stand up against the combined power of him and the replica Emerald Cliff Cauldron? What? His expression changed drastically in the next instant. This was because his replica Emerald Cliff Cauldron was shaking in exertion. Even this can't suppress that brat? Pung! The green aura shot upward, revealing Ling Han's fist that was still surging toward the sky. The gigantic green cauldron swayed dangerously, and no more green aura was able to flow down from its body. Wah! Zhang Tong spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was linked to this replica Emerald Cliff Cauldron, meaning that he would also suffer a backlash should the cauldron be damaged. His body was burning, and he felt as if it were about to burst apart. The onlookers were stunned. Chapter 1136, I'll kill him if I want to. The combined power of Zhang Tong and his replica of the Emerald Cliff Cauldron was actually unable to suppress Ling Han. One had to realize that Zhang Tong had once been a key disciple. However, he had been easily defeated by someone now. Didn't this mean that Ling Han possessed the strength of a seed? Gasp! How were they to believe this? Who on earth are you? Zhang Tong knew that he had kicked an iron plate. The person who'll kill you. Ling Han replied. He swung a fist toward Zhang Tong, and the fist was so magnificent that even heaven and earth lost their luster. Zhang Tong didn't dare face this attack head-on. He gritted his teeth and turned around to run. He had fled. Arrogant as Zhang Tong was, he had been forced to flee after exchanging just 2 strikes with Ling Han. The onlookers could barely believe their eyes. Thinking about it carefully, however, Zhang Tong had been forced onto his back foot during both of the exchanges. He had even activated his replica Emerald Cliff Cauldron the second time around, yet this had failed to turn the tables in his favor. That being the case, why would he stay to fight? Ling Han smiled faintly. He snapped his fingers, and soaring sword intent transformed into a streak of light that shot toward Zhang Tong. The ensuing sword light was as quick as light. Zhang Tong raised his arms to block, yet how could he block something that was traveling at the speed of light? Pooh! The sword light slammed into his back and violently ripped him into 2 pieces. The onlookers wet their pants in fright. Someone as powerful as Zhang Tong had been sliced in 2 by a casual sword light attack resulting from a snap of that person's fingers? Ling Han was extremely satisfied. His strike had been a combination of the fast technique and the power of regulations, and it was because of this that it had been so quick and powerful. However, the fast technique by itself would be quicker, while the power of regulation by itself would be more damaging. He had indeed combined these 2 techniques together. However, it was also clear that he hadn't unleashed the full potential of either of the 2 foundation techniques. This was good news. This signified that the combination technique could still become stronger. Meanwhile, Zhang Tong still wasn't dead yet. The vitality of mountain river tier cultivators was tremendous, and Zhang Tong extended his arms to piece the 2 halves of his body back together. He furiously channeled his origin power in order to prevent excessive blood loss as he did this. His vitality would suffer a huge blow if he lost too much blood. He coughed blood and said, "Sir, don't you think you're going too far? You have to realize that my master is Yang Hao." "I know," Ling Han said with a nod. However, he immediately launched another sword light toward him. Fuck! Zhang Tong swore in his mind. What the fuck do you know? I've already said that Yang Hao is my master, yet you still dare to attack. The crowd suddenly erupted into a frenzy at this moment. This commotion wasn't just traveling through the spectators of this battle, but rather through everyone at the foot of the mountain. There were at least 100,000 people calling out together, and this instantly gave rise to noise that shook heaven and earth. This was because the seeds who were planning to pick followers had finally arrived. Everyone had been waiting for this moment, so they naturally shouted at the top of their lungs in order to attract the attention of the seeds. They hoped that the seeds would favor them and thus select them as a follower. A total of 20 seeds had arrived, with the men being handsome and the women being beautiful. They were all extremely young, yet all of them exuded a powerful aura. A youth in green humphed coldly, and said, "Humph, what a bunch of trash. Why do I have to select trash to follow by my side?" He appeared especially arrogant. He was only at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, and this cultivation level definitely couldn't be considered high. However, the fact that he had become a seed of the Majestic Heaven Sect revealed that he definitely possessed a supreme talent. The sect had taken a fancy to his potential, not his current cultivation level. "I second that. Let's go back," a young woman said. There was a dab of cinnabar on her forehead, and this made her appear even more beautiful. "Huh. It seems like there's a commotion over there." A red-robed male suddenly pointed toward the location of Ling Han and Zhang Tong's battle. "That's Zhang Tong," the youth in green said. However, a look of displeasure instantly spread across his face, and he said, "Someone actually dares to provoke the follower of Senior Brother Yang? I need to see who has such gall." He leaped up and dashed toward the location of Ling Han and Zhang Tong. The crowd instantly parted to let him pass. Who dared to ask to be his follower at this moment? Doing so would be to seek a beating. The youth in green observed the situation, and immediately shouted, "Stop! Young Master Fu!" Zhang Tong shouted in excitement. It was as if he had seen his savior. He was a seed. He would definitely be safe if young Master Fu stood up for him. Pooh! However, his excitement had come too early. Ling Han showed no signs of stopping, and he immediately unleashed another burst of sword light that smashed his head into bits. This time, Zhang Tong's divine sense was ruthlessly obliterated. Even Genesis tier saints wouldn't be able to revive him. The youth trembled in fury. He had already shouted at him to stop, yet that person had actually ignored him. How audacious. He deserved to die 10,000 times over. "Are you going to end your own life, or do I have to help you end it?" he said coldly. "Dumb C***NT. Ling Han sneered. He then continued to walk forward. "Very well. Very well." The youth in green pointed at Ling Han, yet Ling Han simply walked past him as if he didn't exist. This infuriated him even more, and he extended an arm to grab at Ling Han. "Do you know who I am? I'm Fu Liangye, the imperial grandson of the great heaven Majestic Empire." Ling Han didn't turn around, and instead simply snapped his fingers. "Pa!" A bloody hole instantly appeared on Fu Liangye's palm. "Ah!" he shrieked in pain. The surrounding people all became pale with fright. This person was a little too fearless, wasn't he? Not only had he killed Yang Hao's follower because he had wanted to, but he had even attacked and wounded a seed. "How brave of you!" Fu Liangye said with a dark expression. "You're taking advantage of your higher cultivation level to bully me, aren't you?" He was only at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, so there was no way he could battle against a cultivator at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, regardless of how prodigious he was. He had only dared to stand out because of his special status was a seed of the Majestic Heaven Sect, and also the imperial grandson of the great heaven Majestic Empire. Ling Han ignored him and continued to walk forward. He was heading where the other seeds were all standing. He could already see that person, the target of his trip. She was the 9th King Hu Feiyan. This absent-minded woman was currently dozing off, and it was as if she hadn't had enough sleep. She was starkly different from the other mighty and haughty-appearing seeds. Ling Han truly didn't understand how she had been chosen as a seed. After being wounded by Ling Han, Fu Liangye didn't target him anymore. In any case, this was the territory of the Majestic Heaven Sect, so there was nowhere that Ling Han could run. He followed Ling Han through the crowd, eventually arriving back at where he had just been. Humph. Dogs should remain where dogs should remain. Is this a place that you can come to? The young woman with the dab of cinnabar on her forehead scolded. Her face was filled with utter contempt. She was Gan Shiyun, a member of the Gan clan from the 100-bird Majestic Empire of the Peace Gate planet. The Gan clan was a super powerful force of the 100-bird Majestic Empire, and they even possessed elites at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Even the imperial family had to appease them through marriages. Thus, Gan Shiyun was, in effect, no different from a princess. This naturally resulted in her becoming incredibly haughty. Although she was beautiful, her beauty was nothing compared to Shui Yenyu's. In fact, Shui Yenyu's disposition was countless times more attractive than hers. Not to mention, Ling Han had spent 2 years alone with Empress Wan Xing. What other beauty could still attract his gaze? He ignored her words and headed straight for Hu Feiyun. Detestable. Gan Shiyun said with a cold humph. She waved her hand and summoned a whip before immediately whipping it at Ling Han. Divine patterns glowed in the air. It was evident that this whip was a god tool. Her cultivation level was much higher than that of Fu Lianjiesh was at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. The might of her whip strike was astounding. Chapter 1137, Goddess Furnace. She was a super genius who was no weaker than Xiao Sisi, and Xia Wuxia power had already reached 6 stars. She was at the peak stage of the mountain river tier, and her power was 6 stars above this level. Just how terrifying was this? Swoosh! The winds and clouds swirled under the effects of the whip, and it was as if a gaping hole were going to be torn in the sky. She was different, very different. Although Fu Lianye was also a seed-level genius, his cultivation level was still too low at the moment. Thus, he was nowhere near the level of Gan Shiyun. Ling Han knew that the him from 2 years ago would only be able to withstand the power of this whip with his physique. Now, however, he casually raised his hand and brought 2 of his fingers together. Pa! The whip was easily caught between his 2 fingers. Pooh! Countless people almost spat their tongues out in shock upon seeing this. Gan Shiyun was a seed-level genius of the Majestic Heaven Sect. Moreover, she was also at the peak stage of the mountain river tier. Theoretically speaking, she should have been invincible in the mountain river tier at the very least. No one should have been able to suppress her. However, this youth had casually caught her whip, and his expression was as if he still had a lot of strength to spare. How large was the gap between them? Gan Shiyun's eyes also bulged in shock. A frosty chill gripped at her heart, and she thought, how can this youth be so powerful? He didn't use any secret techniques, and he relied solely on his power to catch my whip. This signified that his power was far above hers. Moreover, his physique was also freakishly sturdy. Otherwise, one would definitely get injured after catching a god tool like that regardless of how strong their power was. However, could such a person really exist in this world? If they did, shouldn't they be a seed of the Majestic Heaven Sect? Ling Han let go of the whip, and said, one shouldn't be too domineering. Being kind to others is also equivalent to leaving a path of retreat for oneself. He turned toward Hu Feiyun with a smile, and said, Ninth King, there's a letter for you. Hu Feiyun seemed a little dazed as she accepted the letter from him. She speedily read through it, and then asked in confusion, Big Sister sent you over to become my follower? That's right, Ling Han said with a nod. What? The people nearby were all stunned upon hearing their exchange. This person who could casually catch Gan Shiyun's whip strike with 2 fingers was actually going to become Hu Feiyun's follower. Although the people here all wished to become followers of the seeds, this was largely because they weren't talented enough to become disciples of the Majestic Heaven Sect. Otherwise, how many people would be willing to become servants? However, judging by Ling Han's abilities, he could have definitely qualified as a seed-level disciple. So, why was coming here to become a follower? Even if he had missed the Majestic Heaven Sect's recruitment period, couldn't he just wait for the next recruitment period? It was only 100 years away, an insignificant amount of time to immortals. The onlookers couldn't understand his actions. Then, they all looked toward Hu Feiyun in envy. Now that she had obtained such a powerful follower, her position in the sect would definitely rise to an even greater level. Who are you? Hu Feiyun was still as ditzy as always. Ling Han smiled, and said, Han Lin. Han Lin, Han Lin. Ling Han. Hu Feiyun's eyes suddenly lit up, the air of ditziness completely leaving her. A smile blossomed on her face. Her appearance was still a bit ditzy, though, and this filled her smile with the innocence and adorable nature of a young girl. Ling Han smiled faintly. Although this woman was a bit ditzy, she wasn't stupid at all. She had guessed his identity from his alias alone, and this was enough to show the quickness of her reactions. Detestable. Gan Shiyun shouted in fury. Flames surged from her body and weaved into a dense field of divine patterns, making her appear like a goddess of flames. Ling Han turned around and chided, "Hasn't anyone told you that it's rude to interrupt the conversations of others?" "That's right." Hu Feiyun concurred. Her personality hadn't changed at all. There was a look of rage on Gan Shiyun's pretty face. These two people were working together to ridicule her. Disciples of the Majestic Heaven Sect obviously weren't allowed to kill each other, yet there was no such restriction for mere followers. Thus, no matter how talented he was, what did it matter if she killed him? The dab of cinnabar between her brows flashed, and a furnace surprisingly flew out. Its emergence instantly caused the temperatures in the surrounding to soar. Crap. That's the Gan clan's goddess furnace. It's a heavenly body tier precious treasure, and it can incinerate all life. No, this is only a replica. The real goddess furnace is definitely still at the Gan clan. That still doesn't change the fact that it's extremely powerful. In fact, it's almost at the sun-moon tier. The surrounding onlookers frantically retreated. A seed at the consummate level of the mountain river tier was unleashing her might, and even fellow seeds would have to draw on their full power if they were to battle against her. Thus, what right did they have to spectate the battle from a close distance? Ling Han shuffled over to block Hu Feiyun behind him. Meanwhile, the ninth king stuck her head over Ling Han's shoulder in confusion, and said, "Why is she so angry?" The people in the surroundings all wore strange expressions. Will Gan Shiyun vomit blood upon hearing this? Gan Shiyun didn't vomit blood. However, her pretty face darkened considerably, and she instantly activated her goddess furnace. Boom! Countless bursts of flames soared into the air and intertwined to form sheets of dazzling divine patterns. This was a terrifying sight. Roaring flames incinerate the heaven, she roared. She smacked the goddess furnace, and the lid of the furnace instantly flew up, releasing a green flame that surged toward Ling Han. Ling Han activated an origin power shield. His physique was obviously powerful enough to resist these flames, yet his clothes would definitely be burned to ash. If he allowed these flames to hit him, he would definitely be stripped naked. He naturally couldn't let this happen. "I've got to buy some precious treasure clothes," Ling Han mumbled to himself. They don't need to possess much defensive ability, but they definitely have to be resistant to fire and water. Die. Gan Shiyun controlled her goddess furnace and charged toward Ling Han. Since the surging flames couldn't kill Ling Han, she would absorb him into the furnace and refine him using its divine flames. That ought to incinerate him into ashes, right? Wang. The goddess furnace expanded and bore down on Ling Han. There was a deafening noise as the goddess furnace slammed into the ground. Meanwhile, Ling Han was nowhere to be seen. He had been trapped inside the furnace. Ha 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 ha. Gan Shiyun roared with laughter. Ling Han had been trapped inside the goddess furnace, so what use was it that he possessed an incredible power? Being incinerated into ashes was his only fate. Pung! A fist-shaped dent appeared on the lid of the furnace, causing the entire furnace to shudder. Pung! Immediately afterward, another fist-shaped dent appeared. Then a third, a fourth. Pang, 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 pang. The goddess furnace instantly lost its original shape, becoming extremely irregular in appearance. Everyone's mouth gaped open in shock. In fact, their jaws hung so low that even a fist could be stuffed into their mouths. It was clear that Ling Han was unleashing his might. Gan Shiyun had no option but to continue. "Refine him," she shouted frantically. She unleashed the full power of the God tool and attempted to refine Ling Han using the supreme divine flames. Even the seeds went pale upon witnessing this sight. What kind of freak is that person? He's already been trapped inside the goddess furnace, yet he still hasn't been refined yet. Not only that, but he's even as energetic as can be. The goddess furnace has almost been destroyed by him. Although this isn't the real goddess furnace, it's still an extremely terrifying mountain river tier god tool. This is simply unbelievable. Chapter 1138, Analyzing the Divine Patterns. Pang. 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 The goddess furnace became more and more mangled as it was ferociously punched by Ling Han. Right now, it was so disfigured that it couldn't even be called a furnace anymore. Initially, Ling Han had still needed to use an origin power shield to protect his clothes. However, he retracted this shield after being absorbed into the furnace. So be it if his clothes were incinerated. His physique was already on par with level 5 godly metal anyway, so even elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier would find it extremely difficult to injure him. He put all of his power behind his attacks, and at this moment, his fists could be seen as a pair of level 5 god tools. They were shrouded in divine patterns and brimming with destructive power. Ling Han aggressively destroyed a section of the furnace. However, this furnace had been forged from several layers of godly metal, and thus the furnace wasn't punctured even though he had destroyed a layer. Rather, the layer of godly metal behind it appeared before him. Ling Han saw a divine pattern on this layer of godly metal. This is the martial intent left by some fire element cultivator. I can use it for reference and learn from it. Ling Han was overjoyed, and he immediately stopped his attacks and started to analyze the divine pattern. This divine pattern wasn't complete, with only a small portion of it being visible. The rest of it was hidden behind the most internal layer of godly metal. Pang, 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 pang. He started to unleash his devastating attacks again. Only when the entire divine pattern was revealed did Ling Han stop his attacks. He continued to analyze the divine pattern. Just like that, he would launch ferocious attacks one moment, and then stop to analyze the divine patterns the next. The people outside didn't know this, so they found this situation to be extremely strange. What on earth is going on? He's incredibly ferocious at times, and smashes the furnace so relentlessly that it appears as if it's going to explode. However, he suddenly stops attacking and goes completely quiet at other times. Is he resting inside? Humph. Who can escape from the goddess furnace? Gan Shiyun said haughtily. If this were the real goddess furnace, even heavenly body tier elites could be forcefully refined. Everyone nodded in agreement. By the looks of it, Ling Han was already a spent force. It had already been a long time since they had heard him attacking the furnace. Sure enough, this goddess furnace was incredibly powerful. Hu Feiyun tilted her head upward, and confidently said, "Humph. Ling Han Lin definitely won't be refined." In her mind, Ling Han was invincible. Right now was also no exception. What an absolute joke. He's already been trapped in the goddess furnace, so how can he escape? Fu Lianye said in scorn. Gan Shiyun smiled coldly, and said, "You said that the fool isn't dead yet? Then tell him to give a shout." Pang. Another fist-shaped dent appeared on the goddess furnace at this moment, causing the entire furnace to shudder. This. She had just asked Hu Feiyun to have Ling Han give a shout, and he had responded the very next moment. The devastating power of his punch was more than enough to prove that he was still alive and well. Gan Shuyuan's and Fu Liangye's expression darkened. This was utter humiliation. It was as if they had been slapped across the face. Hu Feiyun couldn't help but laugh in a silvery voice. It was just as she had expected. How could Ling Han be restrained by this mere furnace? Meanwhile, Ling Han had already finished analyzing the first divine pattern in the goddess furnace. Thus, he started to attack the goddess furnace again. After destroying a nearby section of godly metal, he stopped his attacks and continued to analyze the divine patterns. He had the Black Tower and the Reincarnation Tree, so one day's comprehension was equivalent to 1 year's worth. Thus, the speed of his comprehension was incredible. The entirety of the second divine pattern was finally revealed after he destroyed another layer of godly metal. Ling Han memorized this divine pattern, and then entered the Black Tower to comprehend it under the Reincarnation Tree. This way, he would be able to understand and master this divine pattern as quickly as possible. Another divine pattern of flame had already appeared on his mountains and rivers. It wasn't long before he exited the Black Tower. Pang, pang, pang. The third divine pattern was revealed after another burst of ferocious attacks. Ling Han started his comprehension again. The people outside were completely stumped. The person inside would attack for a while, and then suddenly stop. What on earth was he doing? Some thought that he was on the verge of being refined, yet he would continue to launch devastating attacks once in a while. Others thought that he could escape from the furnace, yet he would suddenly stop after attacking for a while. What the hell are you doing? The people outside were almost driven crazy. After a few hours, Ling Han had already destroyed all of the internal layers of the goddess furnace. He had also analyzed and grasped all of the divine patterns. However, he still hadn't had enough, and he wondered just how good it would be if he could analyze the real goddess furnace. It was a shame that the goddess furnace was a precious treasure of the Gan clan. That being the case, how could he possibly analyze and comprehend it? Generally speaking, God tools were all nurtured and formed by the martial intent of cultivators. They would be inscribed with one's comprehension of the great Tao, and such comprehensions would reveal themselves in the form of divine patterns. Thus, analyzing these divine patterns was equivalent to analyzing a cultivator's martial intent. Of course, not all divine patterns were worthy of being analyzed and mastered. However, it would only take a glance for one to determine whether a divine pattern was worth studying or not. After all, how could immortals not possess such judgment? In any case, Ling Han had already grasped all of the divine patterns, so there was no point in him staying in the goddess furnace for any longer. Ling Han sighed in disappointment. Why didn't this goddess furnace give him more divine patterns to comprehend? These divine patterns of flames were extremely helpful to him. Pang, 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 pang. He started to unleash his full power against the goddess furnace. He was like an enraged ape, and the goldy metal in the furnace was destroyed layer by layer. Although this goddess furnace was only a replica, it was still extremely sophisticated. It was forged from 9 layers of godly metal, with divine patterns inscribed into each layer. It was especially mighty, and it was basically indestructible. At least for cultivators at the mountain river tier. However, Ling Han was an exception. One had to realize that his physique was on par with level 5 godly metal. Not only that, but his power could also surpass 7 stars, with his fists being almost as powerful as level 5 god tools. The goddess furnace was no match for Ling Han, and it was destroyed layer by layer. The onlookers had already become accustomed to this banging sound as they had heard it every once in a while. However, they quickly realized that this time was different. Because, the banging sound had gone on for far too long. Boom! A hand suddenly reached out from the goddess furnace. At the same time, a giant crack appeared on this furnace that had already been beaten beyond recognition. Pang! There was another deafening boom, and the crack grew even larger, revealing a youthful face. It was Ling Han. Gasp! Everyone drew a sharp breath. Judging by his relaxed expression, he hadn't been wounded a single bit. This was the goddess furnace. Yet, it had actually been brutally smashed open. Not only that, but the culprit was actually unscathed. Oh. Ling Han had initially wanted to climb out, but he suddenly faltered, and said, "Hang on a second." He retrieved some clothes from the Black Tower and put them on. With that done, he swung his fists a few more times and blasted open a hole that was large enough for him to get through. He then casually stepped out. Gan Shiyun's face twitched in disbelief. That was the goddess furnace. Although it was a replica, it was still a precious treasure. She had only been bestowed with this treasure because she was the most prodigious clan member of her generation. However, this god tool that she took so much pride in had actually been destroyed before her very eyes. She was unable to accept this. Could it be that Ling Han was actually a humanoid god tool? "Compensate me for the goddess furnace," she screamed in a high-pitched voice. This precious treasure belonged to the clan, and she had only been bestowed with the right to use it. She didn't own it. Compensate you for what? This is my spoils of battle. Ling Han stowed the remains of the goddess furnace into his Black Tower. Although it wasn't a god tool anymore, he couldn't waste the materials. He could use it to elevate the quality of his divine demon sword. Why? Gan Shiyun was seething with rage. Not only was Ling Han not planning to compensate her for the goddess furnace, but he had even taken its remains for himself. He had gone too far. Chapter 1139, Becoming a Seed. How dare you? Gan Shiyun shouted in rage. You're merely a lowly follower, yet you actually dare to steal my god tool? Are you trying to belittle the Majestic Heaven Sect? Gan Shiyun wasn't wrong to say this. One of them was a disciple of the Majestic Heaven Sect, while the other was only a follower of another seed. Not only that, but she was also a seed. Meanwhile, Ling Han couldn't even be considered a disciple of the Majestic Heaven Sect. However, their cultivation levels were similar, yet she, a seed, couldn't even defeat another seed's follower. What face did she have to seek help from the sect? Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "I understand. I won, so I took something as my spoils of battle. If you want it back, fine. Defeat me first. Defeat Ling Han." It was that easy. These words had always only been spoken by the seed-level prodigies. Now, however, a mere follower was saying it in an extremely arrogant manner. Hu Feiyin nodded, and said, that's right. This is Ling Han Lin's spoils of battle. She was only adding more fuel to the fire. To say nothing of Gan Shiyun, even the other seeds wore looks of anger. They felt as if they along with their dignity were being walked over. They shot hostile glances at Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Are you people going to shamelessly gang up on me at the slightest of disagreements? Come, I'll take whatever comes my way. You can challenge me one-on-one, or you can all come at me as a group. It's all up to you. However, don't forget to submit to me if you lose." This infuriated the seeds even more. The fact that they had become seeds signified that they were invincible against those at the same cultivation level even if they had opponents, it would be their fellow seeds. However, they were being belittled by a mere follower now, so how could this not stoke their anger? These people had been arrogant and prideful even before they had entered the Majestic Heaven Sect. Hu Feiyin clapped her hands, and exclaimed, "Han Lin, you're so amazing." This ninth king had been completely spoiled and pampered, and she was even a little ditzy on top of that. As a result, she couldn't read the mood at all. However, none of the seeds stepped forward to challenge Ling Han, even though they were all incandescent with rage. This was only natural. Gan Shiyun was definitely one of their stronger members, yet she had still been defeated, even after summoning her replica goddess furnace. Would the results change if they challenged Ling Han? No way. Perhaps there was only a tiny number of mountain river tier cultivators who could suppress this freak, those king tier prodigies who had formed 5 mountains and rivers. If one couldn't reach the true pinnacle of the mountain river tier, they could only be referred to as prodigy, super genius, or supreme prodigy. They were quite some way off becoming a king-tier prodigy. Hee hee. There was a drawn-out laugh, and a skinny man suddenly appeared among the onlookers. His aura was obscure, yet sensing just a tiny bit of it was enough to elicit a feeling of apprehension from the depths of one's soul. He was a supreme elite. The seeds hurriedly clasped their hands in greeting and said, "My respects to Elder Hai Yun." Their expressions were especially respectful. This was because Elder Hai Yun was a heavenly body tier elite. Although they were all seed-level prodigies, being a seed meant that 90% of them could advance to the Sun-Moon tier, and most of them to the peak stage. Only less than 1/10 of them could eventually become heavenly body tier elites. This was already an optimistic estimate. Thus, how could they not suppress their pride and arrogance before such a supreme elite? Elder Hai Yun waved his hand. He turned his gaze to Ling Han, and the more he looked, the more surprised he became. Fortunately, his expression was hidden by the air of primal chaos that shrouded his face. Otherwise, the onlookers would definitely be stunned. A heavenly body tier elite was actually this surprised. "Young man, are you interested in joining our sect?" Elder Hai Yun smiled, and said, "I can guarantee that you'll become a seed." Everyone was stunned by his words, yet at the same time, they all felt that it was reasonable. Ling Han was able to defeat Gan Shiyun, a seed, with ease. Moreover, their cultivation levels were the same. This was enough to prove just how terrifying Ling Han's abilities were. If a prodigy like him couldn't enter the Majestic Heavens sect and become a seed, what kind of awkward situation would the other seeds be placed in? However, the Majestic Heavens sect had its own rules. It had never accepted a disciple outside of its recruitment periods that occurred once every 100 years. This was a custom that had been developed since long ago. However, Elder Hai Yun had actually broken this rule for Ling Han the first time that he saw him. This was naturally astounding. Ling Han pondered for a moment before answering, "I'm willing to join the Majestic Heaven sect." This had been his plan all along. Elder Hai Yun laughed heartily and appeared especially satisfied. He nodded and said, "The rest of you also choose some followers. Han Lin, come with me in a while. I have some things to say to you." "Understood," Ling Han said with a respectful nod. This was the respect that one had to show to heavenly body tier elites. Gan Shiyun's entire body shook in anger. What could she do now? Ling Han had also become a seed, so she couldn't even borrow the power of the sect. No. She definitely had to wash this humiliation away. If she wasn't powerful enough, she would seek help from others. She would seek help from those true freaks. Ling Han swept his gaze around the surroundings. He then strode toward the man and woman who had stepped out to help him just then. Now was different from just then, and his status had already changed completely. The crowds parted to let him through, and they all gazed at him with eagerness and fervor. They hoped that he would choose them as his followers. Many beauties also winked at him, their expressions as charming as could be. If they were chosen by Ling Han, they would definitely be willing to give even their bodies. Anyhow, being able to follow a seed-level prodigy was like a sparrow reaching a branch and being able to transform into a phoenix. It was a shame that Ling Han paid them no attention at all. He directly walked past them and arrived before the man and woman. Meanwhile, the 9th king also followed behind him. She was incredibly bored here, and she had finally come across an old friend. Thus, there was naturally a lot that she wanted to say. Ling Han smiled, and asked, "This brother, are you interested in becoming my follower? Also, your junior sister can become her follower." He pointed toward Hu Feiyun. Hu Feiyun cocked her head and looked at the beauty in green, not appearing to have any objections. She really couldn't care less whom she took as a follower. Since Ling Han had given her a suggestion, she naturally wouldn't turn him down. The senior brother and junior sister duo was delighted by Ling Han's proposal. However, they were also feeling a little nervous and afraid. "I have to accept your gesture of goodwill for stepping out to help me. The most important thing to a cultivator is their disposition, and the actions of you two have won my admiration," Ling Han said. The pair exchanged a glance. Then, they both nodded. I'm called Fan Ru, the senior brother said. My junior sister is called Qin Shao. Thank you for taking us as your followers, young Master Han, and he looked toward Hu Feiyun, whose name he still didn't know. She's Hu Feiyun, Ling Han said with a smile. Qin Shao immediately curtsied and said, Greetings, Master. Hu Feiyun hurriedly pulled her up and said, Just call me Fei Fei. I don't like others referring to me as Master. Qin Shao nodded in understanding. She immediately developed a good impression of Hu Feiyun. Okay, let's enter the sect, Ling Han said with a smile. He missed Shui Yanyu dearly, and he also wanted to reunite with his three brothers. He walked side by side with Hu Feiyun, while Fan Ru and Qin Shao walked a few steps behind them. The other seeds also started to select followers, and the atmosphere instantly became boisterous as everyone clamored for a spot. Ling Han had Fan Ru and his junior sister follow Hu Feiyun first while he went over to visit Elder Hai Yun. He followed Elder Hai Yun to a residence on the main mountain peak. Clouds swirled around the peak, making it seem like heaven on earth. This isn't your real appearance. Are you being hunted after offending too many people? Elder Hai Yun cut straight to the point. Chapter 1140, I shall help you deal with it. Ling Han's heart clenched, but he also knew that it was truly difficult for disguise skills of this type to fool the eyes of heavenly body tier. He nodded and replied, My name is Ling Han. On my way to the Majestic Heaven sect, I was attacked, so I decided to simply change my appearance so the other side would believe that I have died. I would also be able to save myself from some trouble in this manner. Elder Hai Yun nodded in satisfaction. If Ling Han had been evasive, he would definitely have been secretly displeased, but now that Ling Han had spoken the truth without the slightest hesitation, his impression of Ling Han became even better. He was an elite of heavenly body tier, and had the feeling of invincibility. Thus, he immediately said, Who are your enemies? I can speak out for you, and have them no longer target you. He was very confident to say such words. What matters could not be solved by a heavenly body tier in this world. At least, in this galaxy, there were definitely none. Ling Han was a bit sheepish, and answered, I have quite a number of enemies. No matter. Elder Hai Yun waved his hand dismissively, not in the least concerned. Ling Han nodded, and replied, My enemies comprise Great Generals Sha and Zhao from Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire, as well as the Eternity Sky Emperor and the Jade Drop Emperor. Additionally, the Dark Night Hall are also having a covetous eye on me. I will be troubling you then, senior. Pooh. Elder Hai Yun almost spat out a mouthful of blood. In his eyes, what kind of people could a mere cultivator of Mountain River tier manage to offend? At best, it would have to be Sun Moon tier, and only those in the low extreme or medium extreme. If not, how could Ling Han possibly be alive until now? He himself was an elite of the heavenly body tier. One word from him, and even those in the consummate level of Sun Moon tier would have to obey his command respectfully. Thus, this was naturally a small matter. But what kind of people had Ling Han offended? Great Generals Zhao and Sha, the Eternity Sky Emperor and Jade Drop Emperor. They were all elites of the heavenly body tier. Even he was only in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, so his abilities were more or less even with those of Great Generals Zhao and Sha. And in front of the Eternity Sky Emperor and Jade Drop Emperor, he wasn't even qualified to speak up. Among immortals, the gap of a minor level would mean a world of difference. What more when some had managed to become emperors, which one of them would not have battle prowess that allowed them to surpass a gap of 4 to 5 stars? You, Elder Hai Yun looked at Ling Han. He was now a little hesitant. Would he be taking in a genius disciple, or an extremely big bundle of trouble? However, with a turn of thought, he laughed loudly. For a mere cultivator of Mountain River tier to offend so many heavenly body tier elites yet still manage to live so heartily was proof enough of his abilities. Who else in this world would be able to accomplish that? If this brat did not die, his future prospects would be boundless. You have formed the 5th Mountain River, right? Elder Hai Yin asked. Yes. Ling Han did not hide that fact. Obviously, on the level of true elites, the fifth mountain river, sun moon, and heavenly body was not a secret, and the so-called saying of five-star geniuses only existing in legends was only a theory that spread in the circle of low-level cultivators. What elite had you seen that had said such words? With their difference in level, the world they came into contact with was naturally different as well. In truth, the joint peace planet did not lack five-star geniuses in terms of power, the true five-star geniuses. Empress Luanxing herself was even a nine-star genius, but normal people would not be capable of coming into contact with such prodigies. Just look at Ling Han. After forming his fifth Majestic Heaven Sect, he had entered into the Majestic Heaven Sect, so what opportunity did normal people have to come into contact with him now? Furthermore, the belief that five-star geniuses only existed in legends was already a universally accepted theory and an ironclad rule that was universally acknowledged. If you suddenly said that there even existed 7 or 8-star geniuses, how many would actually believe you? Human beings usually chose to believe what they were willing to believe. Not bad, not bad. At present, in the mountain river tier, only 7 have formed the 5th mountain river tier. Elder Hai Yun nodded as he gazed upon Ling Han even more kindly than before. Who would not like a genius? Yet Ling Han was slightly surprised. In this generation, there were actually as many as 7 that had formed the 5th mountain river. This was merely a very small galaxy, and there were innumerable such galaxies in the entire immortal realm. Additionally, the overall level of the cultivation world here was not high, with only a single elite of the eternal river tier. Any who managed to reach the heavenly body tier would be capable of building their own power base. If it was in a galaxy with a higher overall level of cultivation, then wouldn't there be even more young king tiers like this? That was definite. Ling Han nodded. However, the path of cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. The further you progressed, the harder it would become. Not only would it be difficult to reach a high cultivation tier, it would naturally be more difficult to cultivate to the pinnacle level on the higher cultivation tiers. A 10-star genius in Mountain River tier might perhaps decline to 9, 8, or 7 stars in future. Who could guarantee that he would be able to cultivate to the pinnacle on every cultivation level? Go on. Be more careful when you do things in future, and try to stay inside the sect, Elder Hai Yun commanded. After finding out what kind of people Ling Han had offended, he no longer dared to take complete charge of the matter. He might really not be capable of dealing with Ling Han's enemies. Ling Han saluted again, then turned and left. His lodgings were on the White Frost Peak. By this time, his rooms had already been prepared. It was a small palace, and was large enough to accommodate over 100 people, but presently, the only 2 staying here were Ling Han and Fan Ru. Not bad, the spiritual qi on the White Frost Peak is especially dense in the first place, and added with the fact that there is a formation in this palace to gather spiritual qi, it is really not bad to cultivate in this place. Ling Han nodded. He told Fan Ru to choose any room, while he himself would naturally be occupying the master rooms. However, if it was in terms of cultivation environment, how could this compare to the inside of the Black Tower? There was a reincarnation tree growing inside. Ling Han worked hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower. At first, he was slightly proud of himself, but when he heard that there were another 6 people in the Majestic Heaven Sect that had formed the 5th mountain river, he felt a strong pressure. In the mountain river tier, he was still not invincible. If he was careless and relaxed, others might catch up to him, or the gap between him and others would become larger and larger. He took out true origin stones, and built a small formation by his side. Abruptly, incredibly rich spiritual qi surged. It was practically impossible for it to disperse, just like a heavy fog. It twined around him, and was absorbed by him. This was completely burning through his true origin stones, but the effects were apparent. The richness of this spiritual qi was at least 100-fold stronger than that of the spiritual qi outside. As Ling Han refined spiritual qi for his own use, he comprehended Tao underneath the reincarnation tree, allowing his thoughts to wander. I still have to combine cultivation with the use of alchemical pills, working on both at the same time. After the night ended, Ling Han stopped cultivation. He looked at Qin Yi and the others, and Yuan Shenghe, who was the most talented, had already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. If it was not because he wanted to make his cultivation level even sturdier, he could already attempt breaking through to the Mountain River tier by now. But there was no rush now. Though Yuan Shenghe was not a top-grade genius, there should be no problem for him to rush up to 14 stars in power. Then, his battle prowess would possibly reach 20 stars, and he could be called a genius in the immortal realm. Ling Han gave the 4 of them a few words of encouragement, and then left the Black Tower. He decided to find Shui Yenyu, the Rain Emperor, and the others. He thought for a moment, and then decided to give more attention to his lover than his friends. He chose to find Shui Yenyu first. Ordinary disciples were naturally not staying on the White Frost Peak, but rather on the Blackwater Peak. This mountain peak was much shorter than the White Frost Peak. On his way here, he could already sense that the spiritual qi in the environment here was much inferior. No wonder there were so many ordinary disciples that wanted to become the followers of Seeds. That was because they would be able to stay on the White Frost Peak, where the environment for cultivation was much better. What a coincidence. Ling Han was just about to find someone to ask where Shui Yenyu was staying when he just happened to see the beauty walk over, and there was a man in green robes following behind her. He looked quite handsome, and seemed quite confident in himself, with a powerful vibe of arrogance. Chapter 1141, Fly. Because they were too far away, Ling Han could not hear what the 2 people were saying. He could only see that the green-robed young man kept bothering Shui Yenyu, and Shui Yenyu was coldly ignoring him. He had not seen her for 2 years, and Shui Yenyu was still as beautiful as she had been. However, she now had a coldness to her that would keep others away, like she was a beauty of ice. But she was the lovely type of woman, so this gave her a feeling of arrogance. She had the bearing of a queen indeed, with a bit of the type of appeal that the Empress Luanxing possessed. Ling Han couldn't help but feel startled. He actually thought of Empress Luanxing again. The charm of this Empress was really too powerful, he kept thinking of her now and then. Ling Han shook his head, and chased out the voluptuous, enchanting figure of Empress Luanxing from his mind. To think of another woman in front of Shui Yenyu was not something good. He strode over. His wife was being targeted by a detestably fly, so he naturally had to run over to become her knight in shining armor. Because they were walking towards each other, the distance between the 2 sides naturally became closer very soon. Junior sister Shui, why don't we go to the northern Goshawk Gorge later? I heard that a godly medicine has appeared there, and a great many people have already gone there to try their luck. The green-robed young man's voice floated over. Bai Hua, how many times have I told you? Don't follow me. Shui Yenyu uttered coldly. She raised her right hand, and frost formed over her hand. She was really angered now. The beauty was fierce, but it did not cause any feeling of disgust. Instead, it added some charm to her. The eyes of the green-robed young man lit up involuntarily. From the moment this beautiful flower had entered into the sect, he had already had his eye on her. And due to his abuse of authority, there was naturally no one that would compete with him. She was already his exclusive property to him. Unfortunately, this seductive beauty would not show a smile to him at all, causing him to be disappointed, but stoking the flames of his fighting spirit at the same time. He was determined to pluck this snowy lotus and have her smile warmly for him. Hi's heart throbbed, and he felt an urge to push this beauty down. Hey, hey, hey. Your eyeballs are about to fall out. Ling Han walked forward, and placed himself between the 2 of them without any explanation. Shui Yenyu immediately looked disgusted, and hurried to take a few steps back. She detested Bai Hua, but this did not mean that she would be close with another man. Bai Hua, though, was angered. Who did you think you were, to actually dare to interfere in his business? He coughed, and said, Junior brother looks quite unfamiliar. Which uncle are you under one? In the Majestic Heaven Sect, ordinary disciples and key disciples would both be taken in by an elite of the Sun-Moon tier. However, they would address him as teacher and not master. Of course, if both sides were happy with the other, their relationship could progress further and develop into a master-disciple relationship. However, seated prodigies did not fall under this restriction. These people would get the personal guidance of heavenly body tier elites, and there was no fix they were under. Whichever heavenly body tier cultivator had free time would come and offer his guidance. Even Venerable Trinity himself would show up occasionally. Ling Han cracked a grin and said, "What, junior brother, do you have any eyes? I am your senior brother." Bai Hua was enraged. He himself was a key disciple. If he was not, he would not be able to intimidate so many disciples and monopolize Shui Yenyu. Just looking at Ling Han, he did not have any sign marking him as a seed, and he recognized all the key disciples. Hence, there was only one possibility, and it was that Ling Han was just a normal disciple. In the Majestic Heaven Sect, the hierarchy was still quite strict. No matter how high the cultivation level of an ordinary disciple was, as long as their major tier was the same, they would have to address key disciples and seated disciples as senior brother or senior sister disciple. Of course, it was the same for key disciples. They would have to be humble in front of seed disciples. You were both in the Mountain River tier, and you, an ordinary disciple, actually dared to call yourself a senior brother in front of a key disciple like himself? To put it more seriously, this was practically treason. How dare you? Bai Hua's expression darkened. There were passers-by in the proximity, and when they saw that there was a free show, they naturally stopped walking. They began to watch the show and even started a commentary, providing a detailed analysis of Bai Hua's identity and battle prowess. Ling Han asked, "What is it? Are you unconvinced?" "Convinced your head." Bai Hua made his move and delivered an attack at Ling Han. Hong, his fist punched out, his fist power forming a black wolf which galloped towards Ling Han. It was formed from origin power, with his martial intent condensed within. Over 30 divine patterns could be seen flickering, which showed that even if he had not used his full effort in this blow, he had at least used 70 to 80%. After all, he was only a key disciple, so how many divine patterns could he form in any case? Ling Han pretended to be flustered, and shot out more than 10 punches in a row to disperse this strike. Who is this? Though he dispersed this strike with great difficulty, to be able to disperse the strike of a key disciple is proof that his abilities are very strong. That's right. Bai Hua has already reached the peak stage of the consummate level, and this person could not possibly be at an advantage in terms of cultivation level, so all he has to rely on is his actual abilities. Do we have this kind of disciple on our Blackwater Peak? They all looked at one another and shook their heads. When Bai Hua saw that he had the upper hand with this strike, he had naturally lost his qualms. This was also what he had expected. In a situation where both sides were of the same cultivation level, how could an ordinary disciple be a match for a key disciple? Otherwise, what was the point of splitting them up into ordinary and key disciples? He continued to release powerful moves, each strike severe. Ling Han merely defended without attacking. He deliberately made it so he cut a slightly sorry figure to avoid Shui Yenyu being able to infer anything. True enough, this seductive beauty did not recognize him at all. Although she kept watching from the sidelines, she did not reveal any obvious inclination which side she was leaning towards. In Shui Yenyu's eyes, he stepped up on his own, most probably because he, too, coveted her beauty. Abruptly, Ling Han had no interest to continue playing with Bai Hua, comparing playing with a man and playing with his wife. Which one was more interesting? Pung! His fist landed on Bai Hua's face, and the latter was suddenly sent flying. Fuck! Seeing this scene, the people in the surrounding area were all dumbstruck and gaped in shock. That was Bai Hua, a key disciple. This had to be a coincidence, everyone thought. Otherwise, how could someone with Bai Hua's abilities possibly have been struck with this blow? Even Bai Hua thought so. One punch from the other had suddenly penetrated his defenses, causing him to be unable to parry in time. He could only watch helplessly as he was hit. He leaped up from the ground, and charged back over at Ling Han with a loud shout. Peng, 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 peng. Another several exchanges later, Bai Hua's lower abdomen was hit with a kick, and he was sent flying. Was it another coincidence? A muscle twitched in Bai Hua's cheek. He charged back again, but he was once more sent flying with a slap in just a few moves. This time, everyone could tell there was something off. How could there be so many coincidences that would cause Bai Hua to suffer time after time? Hee, what are you all watching? A newcomer rushed over, and stuck his head out to look over curiously. However, when he saw the two sides that were fighting, he involuntarily choked with laughter. What is it? Someone beside him asked. Ha ha ha, Bai Hua is seeking his own humiliation here. That person laughed loudly. This senior brother is the super genius that was taken in as a seed as an exception yesterday. He managed to smash even senior sister disciple Gan Shiyan's goddess furnace with brute force. Pooh, everyone spurted out. Chapter 1142, Jealousy. In the Majestic Heaven sect, every seed was definitely outstandingly famous. About 10,000 normal disciples would be taken in at the same time, and there would only be a 1,000 key disciples. As for seeds, there would only be 100 at most. And that would still have to depend on the year. Sometimes, there were even only over a dozen. There had never been an incident wherein a heavenly body tier elite had been nurtured from normal and key disciples, but among the genius seeds, there were such examples, and furthermore, the ratio was even as high as 1 in every 10. Don't underestimate this ratio. It should be known that there would only be 1 in every 10 shattering void tier cultivators that could break through to the mountain river tier, and from the mountain river tier onwards, innumerable people would be stuck at every minor level. Upon further calculation, from the mountain river tier to the heavenly body tier, there was a total of 6 minor levels and 2 major tiers in between. Hence, in billions and billions of mountain river tier cultivators, perhaps only one would be capable of reaching the heavenly body tier. And going by that theory, about 10% of the seed disciples would be able to break through to the heavenly body tier, so how terrifying was this ratio? But this was very normal because the genius seeds were the most prodigious geniuses of each planet in the first place. Wasn't the high ratio of breaking through to the heavenly body tier a very normal thing, then? Ling Han was actually a seed. Everyone was shocked, but at the same time, they felt involuntarily amused. Previously, Bai Hua had said Ling Han had an exaggerated opinion of his own abilities, and assumed the air of a senior brother, but in the end? Ling Han was the real senior brother disciple here. Bai Hua naturally heard these words loud and clear. His expression had already turned the color of maroon. This was really too humiliating. He glared at Ling Han, but dared not bear any thoughts of vengeance in his heart. To avenge himself facing a seed-level genius? He would have to be tired of living to do that. Covering his head and face, Bai Hua retreated to one side. He did not dare to fight with Ling Han anymore. A seed was a seed, their battle prowess was too powerful. Ling Han looked at Shui Yenyu with a grin, and asked, "Girl, I've saved you, so shouldn't you repay me with yourself?" Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what kind of expression they should put on. In broad daylight, you immediately started to take liberties with a woman at the slightest chance. Was that really appropriate? Even if you were a seed, you still couldn't be that arrogant. This was the Majestic Heaven sect, and if even the safety of the disciples in the sect could not be ensured, then what further purpose was there for its continued existence? "Thank you," Shui Yenyu replied coldly. Bai Hua did not leave, because he wanted to see Ling Han deflated in front of Shui Yenyu. True enough, this woman would not give face even to a seed. Elation involuntarily rose up in his heart. Seeing something that he could not obtain for himself, he naturally hoped that others would similarly not be capable of obtaining it. What if I insist? Ling Han stepped in front of Shui Yenyu, stretching his arms open, looking completely like a bully stealing away a bride for himself. The sect has its rules, Shui Yanyu uttered icily. She did not believe Ling Han would do so, and the great elites in the sect wouldn't allow him to do as he liked. Ling Han snickered, and said, "You are my wife, it is destined." He used his own voice to speak out these words. Abruptly, Shui Yanyu started. A sliver of pleasant surprise appeared on her beautiful face, but at the same time, there was also caution. After all, she could not confirm the identity of a person just based on voice alone. "Come, give me a hug," Ling Han said, and without asking for Shui Yanyu's agreement, directly wrapped her inside his arms. Fuck, he really succeeded? Everyone took a sharp breath. They felt that this seed-level genius was really too perverted to actually take liberties with a junior sister in front of all their eyes. Wasn't that seeking his own death? No matter how much of a genius you were, if you publicly trampled over the rules of the sect, who would be able to cover for you? With this embrace, Shui Yanyu naturally smelt a familiar scent immediately. It was him. She couldn't help but become excited, and involuntarily stretched out her arms to embrace Ling Han back. Pooh! Everyone spluttered. What was going on here? She was hooked so quickly. They did not know that Ling Han and Shui Yanyu were already a couple, and thought that Shui Yanyu had been moved with this embrace from Ling Han. Naturally, all of them felt regret. If they had known, they would have used force against this seductive beauty. Just see how easily she had been hooked. Baihua even spat out a mouthful of blood. He felt that a great injustice had been done to him. So it turned out that this woman liked a man that was forceful. Previously, he had pursued Shui Yanyu relentlessly without any success, and now, one forceful embrace from Ling Han, and Shui Yanyu had practically turned into a pool of water. How could he not be greatly angered by this? He only felt that he was the greatest idiot in the entire world. As they had been separated for 2 years, Shui Yanyu's passion burned like fire, and she took the initiative to kiss Ling Han. Ling Han was naturally not about to disappoint a beauty, and kissed her heavily. Wah! A great commotion rose up in their surroundings, everyone cursing this adulteress. Naturally, they were the sour grapes. They were really too envious. A frightening aura swept over, causing an endless coldness to rise up from within the depths of their souls. Pa, 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 pa. Aside from Ling Han, everyone collapsed onto the ground at the same time, and Shui Yanyu, too, dropped bonelessly into Ling Han's arms, her delicate body trembling. Ling Han turned around in shock, and saw that Hu Feiyun was presently looking at him and Shui Yanyu darkly. That endless majestic presence was precisely exuded from her body. But at this moment, Ling Han thought that this was not that muddle-headed girl. It was Empress Luan Xing. Precisely, in the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, Ling Han had already seen Empress Luan Xing appear through Hu Feiyun in a very strange method, and now, she had appeared again. But there was no danger now, so why had you come out? Hold on, could it be because of jealousy? Ling Han felt that this was inconceivable, but aside from this reason, was there any second possibility? He laid Shui Yanyu down, and hurriedly rushed towards Hu Feiyun. He grabbed her wrist in a single move, and declared, "Come with me." Hu Feiyun's, no, the Empress Luan Xing's eyes widened, and she seemed to be about to stretch out her imposing aura to send Ling Han flying. However, for some unknown reason, her heart softened, and she allowed him to take her away. The two of them soon arrived at White Frost Peak, and entered into Ling Han's palace. "What exactly is wrong with you?" Ling Han asked. Empress Luan Xing humphed, and said, "What right do you have to ask me questions? Just now, you almost killed me. Could it be that I can't ask why?" Ling Han uttered angrily. Actually, Empress Luan Xing didn't know herself why she had come out. It was completely a moment of impulse, which she involuntarily put into action. However, she was naturally not going to admit it. She declared, "I will kill whoever I want to, with or without a reason." She was really at Sundara. "You have to give me an honest explanation today." What relation is there between you and the ninth king? Why can you appear in her body? Ling Han said in a justified manner. Do you think I will tell this secret to an irrelevant person? Empress Luanxing smirked, though she felt like going crazy in her heart. He was merely in the mountain river tier, and could actually bargain in front of her? When was it that heavenly body tier had become so cheap? Ling Han stared at her for a moment, and then said, all right, I can tell you some of my secrets, and you, too, must not hide anything from me. Empress Luanxing really wanted to ask him who did he think he was, and what basis did he have to make such a request of her, but every aspect of her time with Ling Han these 2 years rose up in her mind, especially the last bit, when she pounced on him. That scene caused her to blush heavily and her heart to throb madly, and involuntarily, her imposing manner in front of Ling Han softened slightly. Don't resist my divine sense, I will bring you into my spatial god tool. Chapter 1143, Secret of the Nine Snake Tribe. Empress Luanxing naturally knew that Ling Han had a spatial god tool. If this hadn't been the case, she would have pushed him over and done him already. Her beautiful face involuntarily flushed red when she thought of this. She couldn't unleash all of her power in this current body, and thus she couldn't maintain the air of primal chaos around her face. Ling Han could clearly see her expression. This left him astonished. This empress actually has a coy side to her? Has the sun risen from the west? Empress Luanxing became a little angry, and said, what are staring at me for? Ling Han chuckled in reply. It was truly impossible for him to fear this empress anymore. Come. He swept the empress up in his divine sense and brought her into the Black Tower. How is this possible? Empress Luanxing cried in surprise. The space inside this spatial god tool was far too vast. There are heaps of impossible things waiting for you. Ling Han said smugly. Being able to astonish this empress so much made him feel extremely accomplished. Empress Luanxing felt more and more astonished as she walked through the land. This was because there were all kinds of godly medicine growing here. They were all thriving and brimming with vitality, and their ages were also extremely high. She found this to be incredible. Ling Han had clearly only just arrived after opening the sky, so how could he have planted so many godly medicines? He didn't have enough time. Come. Ling Han grabbed the Empress' slender hand as he ran forward. Empress Luanxing instantly felt annoyed. Has he become addicted to grabbing my hand? She tugged her arm and tried to break free from his grip, yet she realized that her strength was surprisingly no match for Ling Han's. She couldn't help but feel shocked. Her cultivation level was clearly unchanged, so why couldn't she break free from a mere mountain river tier cultivator? How was this possible? She was so stunned that she could barely speak. Welcome to my world. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, here, I'm the one and only king. Humph. Small Tower appeared and humphed in displeasure. Ling Han grimaced. He sighed, and said, of course, there's also the tool spirit of this god tool. It never treats might's owner seriously. Well, I'm so sorry about that, Small Tower said sarcastically. Empress Luanxing was transfixed with astonishment. What kind of god tool is this? How is it so impressive? It can even elevate Ling Han's power to a level far above mine. Also, why is this tool spirit so human? It doesn't seem like a tool spirit at all. Shouldn't they be emotionless and rigidly following some sort of regulation? They arrived before the reincarnation tree. Notionless Saint was the first person to notice them. A puzzled expression appeared on his face as he saw Empress Luanxing, and he said, you remind me of the girl from before. However, you're clearly a different person. Strange. Qin Yi and the 3 others all greeted him respectfully, and said, young Master Han. Ling Han waved his hand, and said, there's nothing for you guys to worry about. Keep cultivating and strive to reach the immortal level as soon as possible. Understood. The 4 people returned to their spots under the reincarnation tree and continued to cultivate. Meanwhile, Empress Luanxing stared at the reincarnation tree, and it was as if she recognized this divine tree. After a while, she shouted in surprise, "This is the reincarnation tree." Ling Han nodded, and said, "You're truly knowledgeable. You even managed to recognize the reincarnation tree." Empress Luanxing pondered for a moment before saying, "You bought a seed of a reincarnation tree once. Could this be it?" "Spot on." Ling Han raised his thumb as he praised the Empress. No praise would be too much praise for this kind of stunning beauty. Empress Luanxing naturally wouldn't pay too much attention to his deliberate praises. Instead, she mulled over how this was possible, and said, "It's only been a little over 2 years since you arrived in the immortal realm. Regardless of what you did, it would have been impossible for you to obtain so much godly medicine, to say nothing of this reincarnation tree. That being the case, there's only one possibility left." Her eyes lit up, and she said, "You're able to accelerate the growth of godly medicine." Hee hee. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "How is it? Do you want to cultivate here? This is the reincarnation tree, so 1 day's worth of cultivation is equivalent to 1 year's worth." Empress Luanxing was extremely tempted by this offer. Accumulating origin power was an easy task to an elite like her. She could complete this process in a few thousand years. However, comprehending the Great Tao was different. This step could take millions or even tens of millions of years. The fact that this galaxy only had one eternal river tier elite was proof of just how difficult this step was. Empress Luanxing stared at Ling Han, and asked, "What conditions are there?" "This favor." No, this had already transcended the level of a mere favor. If she exposed the secret of Ling Han owning a reincarnation tree, he would definitely be hunted by all of the saints in the world. "You don't want me to marry down, do you?" Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, "I already said just then. I'll tell you my biggest secret, and in exchange, you also need to tell me your secret." Empress Luanxing humphed upon hearing this. "Do you think this is child's play? You'll tell me one secret and then I'll tell you one?" However, she had to admit that Ling Han trusted her a great deal. After all, he had even revealed the secret of his reincarnation tree to her. She couldn't help but feel slightly touched. Yes, only slightly, she stressed to herself. "What do you want to know?" the Empress asked haughtily. "What's your relationship with this body?" Ling Han asked. This was clearly Hu Feiyan's body, yet she had suddenly become Empress Luanxing. Her power had risen along with this transformation, though it still hadn't reached the same height as Empress Luanxing's original body. Even so, it had still reached the heavenly body tier. I know." Notionless Saint suddenly shouted. He wasn't content with being left aside. "Seen your nose?" Ling Han said in surprise. "Of course." Notionless Saint replied smugly. "It's simple. She's from the 9 Snake tribe." Ling Han was completely baffled. How does her tribe have anything to do with this? Empress Luanxing decided to spill the beans upon hearing this. Otherwise, Notionless Saint would reveal her secret anyway. The 9 Snake tribe has a natural talent. That is, we're able to maintain 9 separate clones. Ling Han was dazed for a moment. Then, he suddenly came to his senses, and said, "This is one of your clones? Hang on a second. 9 kings. The 9 kings are your 9 separate clones?" "Correct," Empress Luanxing said with a nod. Ling Han finally understood why Notionless Saint had said that Empress Luanxing's power should have reached 9 stars, yet the power that she had displayed was far below this level. This was because the Empress had distributed her power among her 9 separate clones. No wonder the 9 kings held such lofty positions and received the unconditional support of the Empress. The reason for this was simple: the 9 kings were Empress Luanxing. Empress Luanxing saw that Ling Han was still a little puzzled, so she continued, "I cultivated the 9 deaths heaven art and formed 9 separate bodies. When all of my clones reached the peak stage of the heavenly body tier and returned to my primary body, I'll be able to reach the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. Ling Han's eyes widened in surprise, and he said, in reality, you're already able to attempt breaking through to the eternal river tier. However, you've held back this entire time just because you wanted to cultivate the heavenly body tier to perfection? What do you think? Empress Wanxing replied haughtily. Ling Han remained silent. However, he couldn't help but admire her in his mind. As expected of the talented and bold Empress. She's gone to such great lengths and even formed 9 clones just to cultivate to a state of perfection. What if something untoward happens to one of your clones? Then I'll suffer an eternal Tao wound and lose any chance of becoming the strongest. Chapter 1144, Intimate Talk with the Empress. So, you have to form 9 clones every time you're trying to reach the pinnacle level? Ling Han asked. Correct. Empress Wanxing nodded with a serious expression, and said, the higher my cultivation level, the longer it takes for my 9 clones to reach the peak stage. This is also a test. If I insist on pursuing the pinnacle level after reaching the eternal river tier, I mightn't have enough time to reach the Genesis tier. However, she paused for a moment before continuing, everything's changed now that there's the reincarnation tree. Things had indeed changed. The higher one's cultivation level, the longer it would take to comprehend the Great Tao. However, the reincarnation tree could assist one in comprehending the Great Tao, with 1 day's worth of comprehension under the reincarnation tree equivalent to 1 year's worth in the outside world. Even cultivating 90 clones would be no problem, much less a mere 9 clones. Ling Han glanced at the Empress. What did she mean? She still hadn't become a member of the Ling clan yet, but she was already planning to take advantage of the Ling clan's resources? Ahem. He coughed softly, and said that, although I shared my secret with you, I never said that I was going to share the reincarnation tree as well. All lands under the heaven belong to the imperial authority, Empress Wanxing said haughtily. You're a citizen of my empire, and I've already shown great generosity by allowing you to maintain possession of the reincarnation tree, yet you still want to keep all the benefits for yourself? Fuck. As expected of a ruler. So slippery. Ling Han shook his head, and said, this is my most valuable treasure, so how can I share it with outsiders? It's not impossible for you to cultivate here, but look, those 4 are my followers, and this senior is. Forget about it, he's not even a person. In any case, you're not one of us, so you can't cultivate here. Notionless Saint couldn't help but feel vexed. If he wasn't a person, then what was he? There was no need to insult him like that, was there? At the very least, he had been a saint once, okay? Sigh, I'm under someone else's roof, so I can only endure this. How could Empress Wanxing not understand Ling Han's words? One of us. What did one of us mean? She humphed in reply. This brat was indeed having dirty thoughts about her. However, she couldn't become angry no matter what. If Ling Han had genuinely been a shameless lowlife, he would have pushed her over and done her a long time ago. Why would he wait until now? What a weird person. Then what do you want? She squinted her eyes, a dangerous aura radiating from her body. Hee, you'd better think your actions through carefully, Ling Han said with a chuckle. This is my territory, so whatever I say goes. Don't act too mighty, or you'll have to be careful of being punished by me. He had wanted to smack this Empress's bottom since long ago. Although this wasn't the Empress' primary body, that didn't matter too much. Her mind and spirit were in this body, so she would definitely feel whatever this body felt. Empress Wanxing's overwhelming aura instantly weakened. If this were the outside world, she would be able to suppress Ling Han with a single hand. But here? Sorry, but this was indeed Ling Han's territory, where everything that he said went. Ling Han rubbed his hands together, and his expression was as if he eagerly wanted Empress Wanxing to act stubbornly and retort. Empress Wanxing rolled her eyes. Ling Han smiled, and said, why did you suddenly appear just then? Wasn't it because you were jealous? Huh. Empress Luanxing chuckled coldly, and said, "Jealous? Do you think I have that much spare time? Then why did you interfere?" Ling Han asked with a smile. He didn't mind wasting time with the Empress. "Why do I have to tell you?" Empress Luanxing said with a cold chuckle. Ling Han grinned, and said, "You asked for it." He lifted the Empress up and pressed her onto his knees. He then immediately started to act like a low-life pervert without a word of warning. Pa, pa, pa. He started to smack the Empress bottom. He was most powerful being in the Black Tower apart from Small Tower. Ling Han had never considered himself to be a person of noble character, and the only thing that had stopped him from forcing himself onto the Empress was the principles that he stood by. However, they had already embraced, felt each other up, and kissed. In Ling Han's books, she was already his wife. They had already gone so far, so how could he allow the Empress to marry someone else? No way. Thus, smacking the Empress bottom didn't weigh him down with any mental burden. The Empress struggled and attempted to break free. This was far too embarrassing. Detestable, she spat through gritted teeth. However, her voice was dripping with a seductive and alluring edge. She was clearly in Hu Feiyun's body right now, so she wasn't a stunning beauty, even though she was still extremely beautiful. However, now that she possessed the Empress soul, her every move was enchanting and filled a womanly charm. Ling Han snickered, and said, "So, are you going to tell me now?" "Do you want to die?" the Empress asked in fury. She had never imagined that Ling Han, who had been so restrained during their 2 years together, would actually do something so audacious. He was actually smacking her bottom. She could feel bursts of numbness traveling over from her bottom. It didn't hurt, yet it felt as if some unknown emotion had been lit inside her, making her involuntarily press her legs together. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Have you learned your lesson yet?" Smacking this clone's bottom already felt so amazing, so how incredible would it feel to smack her primary body's bottom? His heart shuddered as he thought of this, and he almost howled aloud in excitement. Why, you win. The Empress could only submit to Ling Han. The situation left her with no other option. Ling Han still hadn't had enough yet, and he said, "Why didn't you resist for longer?" "I still haven't had enough yet." Sigh. Empress Luanxing felt as if she were about to go crazy. She really wanted to bite him to death. She humphed, and said, "It's not impossible for you to marry me." They had hugged, embraced, and kissed, and she couldn't bring herself to kill this man either. Thus, it seemed as if marrying down was her only option. As an empress, she was naturally domineering and resolute. She definitely wouldn't hesitate and wallow in indecisiveness. "What conditions do you have?" "List them out." Ling Han said confidently. "I'll marry you once you advance to the Genesis tier." Empress Luanxing said. Oi, oi, oi. That's way too insincere." Ling Han said in protest. "You're so talented, yet it still took you 1,000,000 years to reach the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. If I want to marry you, won't that take 2 or even 3,000,000 years?" He feels so good about himself. Empress Luanxing said in her mind. Ling Han had shown zero doubts about being able to reach the Genesis tier. His only worry was how long it would take for him to reach this level. However, was 2 or 3,000,000 years genuinely a long time? If he could reach the Genesis tier in 2 or 3,000,000 years, he would have definitely achieved a first at least. This was the case in Empress Luanxing's mind. 2 or 3,000,000 years was an incredibly short amount of time. I'm about to reach the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. As such, reaching the eternal river tier is only a matter of time. If your cultivation level is inferior to mine, what right do you have to marry me? She said calmly. Understood. Ling Han clapped his hands, and said, Sit tight and wait for me. You're bound to become my wife. Empress Luanxing humphed, and said, That's a matter for the future. Right now, you're still my subordinate. If you dare to She wanted to warn Ling Han, yet he unexpectedly pressed her onto his knees and started to smack her bottom again. Say, Empress, you've gotten one thing wrong. Wedding you is only a formality. Don't attempt to challenge your man's authority. Ling Han was delighted that he had another opportunity to smack the Empress' shapely bottom. Also, what's going to happen to the ninth king's soul? Chapter 1145, Ancient Divine Tribe. Why do I have to explain to you? Empress Luan Xing asked haughtily. Pa. There was a crisp smacking sound. Ling Han waved his hand, and said, It seems like you still don't understand the situation you're in. This smack sent a stinging sensation through her body. The mysterious feeling in her body boiled even more intensely, and it was as if she were about to explode. She didn't dare to keep going. If she was aroused and anything more happened, wouldn't she be frequently subjected to this kind of situation in the future? When this body reaches the heavenly body tier, my willpower will slowly awake and fuse with her, the Empress said. The secret techniques of the 9 snake tribe are all like this. If I'm at the mountain river tier, my 9 clones will awake at the mountain river tier. If I'm at the eternal river tier, my 9 clones will awake at the eternal river tier. Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking, which is to say that she doesn't know of your existence? No, she doesn't, Empress Luan Xing answered. Ling Han's expression darkened, and he said, So, she'll disappear for good once your willpower completely awakens? The personalities of the 9 clones are all originally from my body, Empress Luan Xing said in comfort. In other words, they all represent a part of me. Moreover, I can still split these 9 clones from my body when I reach the eternal river tier. Ling Han relaxed slightly upon hearing this explanation. He had a fairly good impression of the innocent and ditzy 9th king. However, another thought occurred to him, and this caused his expression to become strange. What's wrong? Empress Luan Xing asked. Ling Han hesitated for a moment before saying, Won't I get 9 free wives if I marry you? Holy smokes! How can I pleasure all 10 of you together? Pervert! Empress Luan Xing shouted in anger. She smacked Ling Han and sent him flying. Of course, Ling Han had deliberately allowed her to send him flying. This was the Black Tower, so Empress Luan Xing was definitely no match for him. However, he had already teased her for so long, so it was about time that he relented a bit. Otherwise, he would definitely feel the wrath of Empress Luan Xing once they exited the Black Tower. Thus, it was better to be smacked around here and let her diffuse her anger a little. He ran back, and said, Say, wife. Who's your wife? Empress Luan Xing said in irritation. She had merely given him a chance. As of right now, Ling Han still didn't have the right to have her willingly agree to marriage. Ling Han chuckled, and said, Then what should I call you? Darling? Love? Empress Luan Xing stared at him, dumbfounded. She had initially thought that Ling Han was a serious person. However, who would have thought that he was actually this flippant? She shook her head, thinking that she had perhaps made an incorrect decision. However, she didn't want to correct it. Call me Empress, she said with an emphasis. Ling Han nodded, and said, Okay. I might call you Empress now, but I'll have you call me Lord Husband in the future. That Empress. There's only the 2 of us right now, so is there any need for you to refer to me like that? You're not cute at all. Ling Han sighed before saying seriously, What the hell are the ancient divine tribes? They seem to be really impressive. I know about this. Notionless Saint said. He was starting to seek attention again. He was a mighty saint, yet he had actually been left to the side and ignored. Did those 2 not know just how valuable the time of a saint was? They had the rare opportunity to learn from him, yet they actually didn't take advantage of this chance at all? Empress Luan Xing glanced at that orb of light. With this seemingly all-knowing saint present, there were some things that she couldn't keep secret. That being the case, she might as well take initiative and spill the beans. The ancient divine tribes are a collection of powerful yet lowly populated tribes. They appeared during ancient times, and all members of these tribes possess powerful abilities. Brat, you might also be from an ancient divine tribe, Notionless Saint chimed. Ling Han's physique was incredibly powerful, and he felt that this could only be possible if Ling Han was from an ancient divine tribe. Empress Luan Xing nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his head in disagreement. He had come from an ordinary family, so how could he be a member of some ancient divine tribe? The only reason for his physique and divine sense being so powerful was because he practiced the indestructible heaven scroll. Anyhow, Ling Han hadn't seen any members of the other ancient divine tribes. However, just looking at Empress Luan Xing proved just how incredible their abilities were. Members of the 9 Snake tribe could maintain 9 clones, which was equivalent to having 9 extra lives. This was astonishing, almost unfathomable. Time's almost up. I have to leave now, Empress Luan Xing suddenly said. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, I'll send you out. Empress Luan Xing could know about Hu Feiyun's affairs, but this was a one-sided ability. When Empress Luan Xing possessed Hu Feiyun's body, Hu Feiyun would have no clue about what was happening. This was similar to what had happened in the Heavenly Sea mystery realm. It was clearly Empress Luan Xing who had killed that demonic beast, yet Hu Feiyun thought that it was Ling Han who had killed it. Empress Luan Xing nodded, and the two of them exited the Black Tower together. Am I empty air? Notionless Saint murmured gloomily. Why did they both ignore him? Senior, I have a question. Me too. Qin Yi and the others walked over, and this instantly reignited Notionless Saint's self-confidence. He was in glowing spirits as he helped them. People needed to prove their own existence. They had to feel needed. This saint had passed away far too long ago, and thus his mental state was a far cry from what it had once been. He was already giddy with delight after being praised by a few shattering void tier cultivators. Empress Luan Xing shuddered after exiting the Black Tower. She shut her eyes before immediately opening them again. This only took an instant, yet her disposition had already changed immensely. Her air of haughtiness disappeared, and she became an innocent and ditzy woman. Huh? Why am I here? Hu Feiyun asked with a puzzled expression. She bit her finger and cocked her head, appearing as confused as could be. Wait for me here, Ling Han said. Upon seeing her nod, he went to look for Shui Yenyu. After finding her, he brought her back over here. Shui Yenyu couldn't help but feel some slight fear and respect toward Hu Feiyun. Why was her aura so terrifying? She asked Ling Han quietly. I'll tell you later. Ling Han shook his head, then smiled at Hu Feiyun, and said, Ninth King, I'll take you to a fun place. Okay. Okay. Hu Feiyun clapped her hands in excitement. With her ditzy personality, she would even count money for the person who sold her. Ling Han enveloped the two women with his divine sense and took them to the reincarnation tree in the Black Tower. This is the reincarnation tree, Ling Han said to Hu Feiyun. From now on, come here every night to cultivate. That way, your cultivation will improve rapidly. I have to cultivate again? A bitter expression appeared on Hu Feiyun's face, and she said, I hate cultivating. It's so toilsome and boring. Ling Han's mind wandered to the fact that the Ninth King was a personality that had been split from Empress Luan Xing. This woman was ditzy, and this was a personality that Empress Luan Xing didn't currently possess. She had split it from her main body, after all. This was fairly interesting. What transformations would Empress Luan Xing's personality undergo when she eventually fused with her 9 clones? Don't complain, okay? Ling Han said as he patted Hu Feiyun's head. Make sure to cultivate properly. Hu Feiyun pouted upon hearing this. However, she didn't object to Ling Han patting her head. Meanwhile, Shui Yenyu's eyes almost popped out in shock. That was the 9th king. The Empress had said that seeing the 9 kings was equivalent to seeing her, yet Ling Han was audacious enough to pat her head? However, little did she know that Ling Han had even smacked the Empress bottom just then. Chapter 1146, Gathering of Prodigies. After appeasing Hu Feiyun and getting her to cultivate, Ling Han took Shui Yenyu to the side. The first thing he did was give her a passionate kiss. They hadn't seen each other for over 2 years, and he truly missed this beautiful and bewitching woman. Shui Yenyu tried to break free at the start, yet her body quickly went limp. She collapsed into Ling Han's embrace, and her beautiful face flushed a deep shade of red. Her eyes were as seductive as could be. Don't, she wanted to push him away, yet at the same time, she also wanted to stay in his embrace. Wife, you've been poisoned. This poison can only be cleared away if I sleep with you. Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, this poison is called love, and it's the most potent poison in the world. However, if I don't sacrifice myself for you, who will? Shui Yenyu instantly wanted to roll her eyes. Ling Han was clearly aroused himself, yet he was still trying to find a seemingly legitimate excuse. He was far too shameless. However, she couldn't think straight after being passionately kissed by Ling Han, so she dazedly nodded her head. Only after a while did she realize that this was not the place for such things. However, Ling Han greedily kissed her a few more times, causing her to become even more dazed and spaced out. Right now, all she wanted was to be fiercely taken by this male. I love you, she murmured. I love you too. Ling Han moved his fingers dexterously, and Shui Yenyu's enchanting naked body quickly appeared before him. He dragged a finger across her jade-like body, completely igniting up her flames of lust. Love me. Shui Yenyu wrapped her arms around Ling Han's neck. She hadn't seen her lover for 2 years, and she had been especially worried about him, even though she knew he was definitely safe. After seeing him again, her yearning for him quickly dissolved into flames of lust that seemed as if they wanted to swallow Ling Han whole. Darling. Ling Han passionately kissed this seductive beauty. He wasn't going to stop at just a taste this time. He was going to turn her into his woman. Han, be gentle, she said in a barely decipherable voice. I will. He passionately thrust inside her. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu lay among a field of flowers. Shui Yenyu was cuddled up in Ling Han's lap, a satisfied smile on her face. Baddie, you were only in a rush to do me because you actually want to marry Her Majesty. Shui Yenyu couldn't help but pinch Ling Han after hearing him explain his situation with Empress Wanxing. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head, and said, that was something between you and me. It had nothing to do with others. Wife, you're so beautiful and enchanting, and I've already held back for so long. Weren't you afraid that I would be so pent up that I became sick? Damn pervert. Although they had already become one, Shui Yenyu still couldn't endure Ling Han's teasing. Her face instantly flushed red. Ling Han's lust was instantly aroused when he saw her embarrassed and seductive expression. They were cuddled together, so how could Shui Yenyu not detect his little buddy's movements? Her eyes instantly widened. Wife, it's time for round 2. Ling Han laughed loudly as he pressed Shui Yenyu under his body. Then, he started to launch a new round of attacks. Once, twice, thrice. This was Shui Yenyu's first taste of lovemaking, so she naturally couldn't get enough. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also intoxicated by this seductive beauty, and it seemed as if he were going to forget all matters and lose himself in pleasure. The two of them only concluded their passionate lovemaking experience after 3 entire days. They finally exited the Black Tower, yet Hu Feiyun was already full of complaints. She had been cultivating under the reincarnation tree, where 1 day was equivalent to 1 year. Moreover, she had cultivated for 5 days straight, and she had almost gone crazy from boredom. She shouted that she wanted to go out. Ling Han shook his head. Who would have thought that Empress Wanxing also had such an innocent and ditzy side to her? What would it look like if such kind of personality was displayed by the Empress? He was extremely eager to see it. After exiting the Black Tower, Shui Yenyu immediately started to move out of her old residence. She was naturally going to move in with Ling Han. That way, she could cultivate in the outside world during the day, thereby absorbing the spiritual qi and increasing her origin power. At night, she would enter the Black Tower and comprehend the Great Tao under the reincarnation tree, thereby increasing the speed of her cultivation as much as possible. Ling Han could keep 3 followers, yet he had only taken 1 so far. Thus, it was entirely possible for him to let Shui Yenyu into his palace to cultivate as long as no one snitched on them. Shui Yenyu wouldn't need to relinquish her identity of an ordinary disciple either. Shui Yenyu's main focus was on cultivation, while Ling Han's main focus was on alchemy. He needed money. His divine demon sword was still only a level 3 god tool, and he needed to elevate it to level 4, level 5, and so on. However, that would require a countless amount of level 3 and level 4 godly metal, and purchasing them would cost an astronomical amount. Ling Han did indeed have a lot of true origin stones, yet it was still far from enough. The highest level pill he could refine right now was the mysterious azure pill, with each pill being able to sell for several thousand true origin stones. As for the ingredients, he had already planted them in the Black Tower. It wouldn't be long before he could harvest them, and this would greatly reduce his expenditure. However, Ling Han wanted to refine pills of even higher levels. This was because refining a cauldron of higher level pills would take around the same time, yet the profit that he could make would increase significantly. In addition, he definitely had to leave enough time to cultivate, and thus it was extremely important to pick the right type of pill to refine. Of course, he still hadn't obtained any higher level pill recipe yet, so he naturally had to stick with refining the mysterious azure pill. Ling Han regretted not asking Empress Luanxing to command the Alchemy Institution to make a copy of all of their pill recipes for him. If he had done that, he would have been able to slowly study and digest the recipes. It was a shame that he and Empress Luanxing hadn't been on such good terms at that time. Anyhow, this didn't matter. It wasn't as if he wasn't going to return to the Joint Peace Planet. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was knocking on his door. Fan Ru hurriedly went to answer the door. He returned after a while, and he handed an invitation to Ling Han. "Young Master Han, this is an invitation for you." Ling Han accepted the letter and skimmed over it. A few seed-level prodigies were hosting a gathering where they would enjoy some tea and discuss their understandings of Tao. This gathering would take place tomorrow afternoon, and all seed-level prodigies at the Mountain River tier were welcome to attend. They had all entered the sect for quite some time now, yet they still had yet to properly gather together. The timing is just right. They didn't do this just to suit me, did they? Ling Han said with a smile. He had obliterated Gan Shuyuan's god tool, and he had even taken the remains as his spoils. This woman definitely wouldn't let this matter slide. There are 6 people who have formed 5 mountains and rivers, and this is a great opportunity for me to see just how strong they are. The next day, Ling Han confidently strolled toward the mountain peak by himself. This gathering was held atop the White Frost Peak. This peak was exclusive to seed-level prodigies, so it was impossible for key disciples and ordinary disciples to come and spectate their battles no matter how much they wanted to. The White Frost Peak was especially tall, yet this kind of height was nothing much to cultivators at the Mountain River tier. Ling Han was only walking at a strolling pace, yet he still arrived atop the peak in just an hour's time. "Please show your invitation." This peak was extremely spacious, and there were 2 young men standing by either side of the entrance. Their auras were quite powerful, yet they could only stand guard at the gates. They were probably someone's followers, though they seemed quite remarkable for mere followers. One could imagine just how powerful the seed who they followed was. Ling Han handed his invitation over. One of the young men looked over it, and a hint of earnestness instantly appeared on his face. "Oh, it's young Master Han. Please enter." The peak was filled with stones of all shapes and sizes. These stones were probably seats. Right now, most of the stones were already taken. Ling Han looked around, and he saw a couple of familiar faces. Xiao Sisi, Su Jing, Duan, Quan Lishuan, the Rain Emperor, and Ding Ping. The last 2 clearly didn't recognize Ling Han. They hadn't heard his name yet, so they naturally wouldn't think that he was Ling Han. They merely glanced at him before retracting their gazes. Another few people arrived after him. There was Xia Wuk, and there was also the Dits in Hu Feiyun. There was also Gan Shiyun. She glared at Ling Han once she arrived, a baleful and frosty aura emanating from her body. Chapter 1147, Tasting Tea and Discussing Tao. Ling Han was naturally unafraid. In fact, he couldn't even be bothered to pay attention to her. He casually retrieved a divine fruit and started chomping down on it. This was only a level 2 divine fruit, so it wasn't all that valuable. However, Ling Han was genuinely eating it as if it were just a mere fruit. Many people couldn't help but label him as extravagant in their minds. Gan Shiyun almost exploded in rage. This person was actually eating fruit as if he couldn't see her at all. He was treating her threatening glare as if it were nothing. Damn it. More and more people arrived, and when the sun rose to its peak, no other person arrived. The stones were all taken, yet there were still some people who were standing. These were followers. They stood around the edges as they didn't have the right to stand closer to the center. The number of stones was definitely the same as the number of seeds. Since they were all taken, it was clear that everyone who had been invited to this gathering had arrived. This was the first gathering of the seeds, so everyone was extremely curious about the others. Moreover, each seed was filled with confidence and belief that they were invincible. Thus, they naturally wanted to take advantage of this gathering to assert their position. Everyone's arrived. A man stood up and smiled at everyone before saying, "Perhaps some of you don't know who I am yet. So, let me introduce myself. I'm He Tao, and I entered the sect 900 years ago." This person is incredibly strong, Ling Han said in his mind. He Tao's aura was obscure, and it was as deep and as profound as the sea. It was extremely likely that he had formed a fifth mountain and river, and doing so had allowed him to develop this obscure yet powerful aura. Ling Han wouldn't have thought this if he'd been on the Joint Peace Planet. However, this was the Majestic Heaven Sect, a sect that was overflowing with countless supreme prodigies. Moreover, Elder Hai Yun had said that there was a total of 7 seeds who had formed 5 mountains and rivers, including him. This statement had only encompassed the mountain-river tier. If it were expanded to include the sun-moon tier, the number of people would definitely be more than 7. So, he's He Tao. He can definitely rank inside the top 5 among seeds at the mountain-river tier. Look, the person beside him is Wuxia. He's also a seed-level prodigy. In fact, he's on par with He Tao. Together with Wu Wentong, Shi Angua, Shen Zhuer, and Kuang Pei Shan, the 6 of them are called the 6 Small Kings. There were people whispering to each other, and Ling Han understood the situation after hearing their conversation. The so-called 6 kings were the 6 mountain river tier disciples who had formed 5 mountains and rivers. This is a tea-tasting gathering, so of course there needs to be tea, He Tao said with a chuckle. He retrieved a small cauldron from his spatial spirit tool, and then placed a teapot on top of it. He started to brew tea. He wasn't using ordinary fire, but rather fire that was spitting out from his palm. There were divine patterns intertwined inside the flames, and it was clear that he was actually using the regulations of the Great Tao as his fire source. Ordinary metals would definitely be melted by such divine flames. Moreover, being as powerful as he was, perhaps even level 4 godly metal could be slowly melted by his flames. However, his cauldron was able to withstand these intense flames even though it looked small and ordinary. It showed no signs of melting under the intense heat of the divine flames. This is no ordinary cauldron, Ling Han said in his mind. He wasn't thinking about obtaining this god tool to use as a cauldron. Rather, there was only one thought going through his mind: wanted to slash this cauldron apart and use it to elevate the quality of his divine demon sword. Theoretically speaking, the water in the cauldron should have boiled in no time since it was being heated by such powerful divine flames. However, half an hour had passed, and not a wisp of smoke had drifted from the spout of the cauldron yet. There's extreme night frosty ice inside, so it'll take a while for it to melt. He Tao smiled, and said, however, our tea-tasting Tao discussions will go on for 4 or 5 days at the very least. So, why don't we discuss Tao first? We can taste the tea later. What? Extreme night frosty ice? Many people cried out in surprise. Meanwhile, some people didn't know what this was, and they only understood after listening to the explanations of others. Extreme night frosty ice only forms in the extreme southern regions of the Flying Cloud planet. That place is bone-chillingly cold, and it's blanketed by snow and ice all year round. Moreover, there are countless terrifying caves hidden under the snow and ice. If one steps over them, they might fall into the cave and be sealed in ice forever. Even Sun Moon tier elites aren't willing to go to that place. After all, there aren't any precious godly medicines or valuable demonic beasts there. However, extreme night frosty ice is one of the few special local products. It's formed from the unique Great Tao of the extreme southern lands, and drinking such ice will allow one to comprehend the mysteriousness of ice. If ordinary mountain river tier cultivators come into contact with extreme night frosty ice, they'll immediately be frozen. They'll suffer grave wounds even if they don't die. As expected of senior brother he's even able to get his hands on extreme night frosty ice. How astonishing! Although prodigies were generally unwilling to admit that others were more impressive than them, the truth had already been placed in front of their eyes. If they lacked even the courage to acknowledge someone else's strength, how could they ever wish to surpass them? Thus, everyone looked at He Tao in admiration. He Tao smiled faintly as he continued to boil the extreme night frosty ice. I only obtained this by luck. I was chasing an extreme plain ice fox, and I happened to enter an ice cave where I found a few slabs of extreme night frosty ice. I pondered for a while, and I figured that I may as well bring it back and brew some tea for my junior brothers and sisters to taste. Someone was a little puzzled, and they softly said, "It's such a small pot, will we even get half a cup each?" The cup that he spoke of was more so the extremely small type of teacup, the kind where its content could be downed in a small mouthful. Don't worry, there's another separate space inside the teapot. Although it's not that big, I'm sure it's big enough to provide us with enough tea, He Tao said with a smile. Brother, he has provided us with extreme night frosty ice as tea water. I can't be greedy either, so I'll offer some serene poplar tea leaves. We can use it to make tea in a moment, Wuxia chimed in. Pooh! Many people instantly spluttered in astonishment. In fact, they even wore expressions of excitement and eagerness. Serene poplar tea was definitely extremely valuable. It could help cultivators comprehend Tao, and even Sun Moon tier elites wouldn't necessarily be able to obtain such tea. As expected of a member of the Six Kings, the things that they casually took out could easily astound others. Only the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping were unmoved. How could serene poplar tea move them? In terms of help to one's comprehension, how could it compare to the reincarnation tree? That was a tree that could turn one day's worth of comprehension into 1 year's worth. Could serene poplar tea achieve this? Moreover, they could comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree every single day. Meanwhile, how many pieces of serene poplar tea leaves were there? However, there's only a limited number of tea leaves, 10 to be exact. Wuxia paused for a moment before continuing, how about this? Those who rank inside the top 10 will receive a tea leaf in their tea. What does everyone think? Although the tea leaves would be placed in the teapot to begin with, giving the tea extremely good comprehension effects, how could a clear cup of tea compare to genuinely having a tea leaf in one's tea? Everyone nodded in approval as they rubbed their fists and prepared to fight. Since they were discussing Tao, those who were more powerful would naturally receive more benefits. This was the eternal truth of the cultivation world. The strongest would become kings. I'm Feng Jin. Which junior brother or junior sister is willing to challenge me? A youth immediately leaped out and referred to everyone else as his juniors. This was a display of confidence, and it showed that he was confident in his abilities to become a senior. Heh, I'll challenge you, another youth said as he leaped forward. Please. The two of them clasped their hands in respect before immediately launching into a fight. Their battle was extremely intense. Chapter 1148, Disciples Battle. The cultivation levels of these two people weren't high, with both of them being at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. However, they were naturally talented in their own way, or else they wouldn't have become seeds of the Majestic Heaven Sect. For example, Fang Jin was radiating with a frosty aura that could transform into ice. As such, his opponent's attacks would be sealed by ice before they could even reach him. Meanwhile, his opponent was no pushover either. He could transform into lightning, and this was a technique that was even more powerful than the thunderclap ninth heaven. Divine patterns hovered around his body, and he wasn't afraid to take hard hits from his opponent. Ordinary mountain river tier cultivators would stand no chance against them, even if they were one minor level above them. This was because their attacks would be ineffective against these seeds. However, although physical attacks were ineffective against them, they could still be wounded by attacks that contained intertwining divine patterns. For example, Fang Jin could wound his opponent's lightning body if he stabbed him with a sword that was formed from his frosty aura and laced with intertwining divine patterns. On the flip side, his opponent could also threaten him greatly when he launched spears of lightning toward him. The two of them quickly became serious, and they both started to unleash their full powers. Putting aside their cultivation level, their battle prowess was indeed very impressive. Sure enough, seeds couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han couldn't help but wonder whether he could suppress these two if they were at the same cultivation level. It was hard to say. Ling Han compared his battle prowess to theirs. In terms of strength, these two people were no weaker than him when he had been at the same cultivation level as them. However, this was before taking into account their trump cards. For example, he possessed the fast technique and the annihilating dragon star arrow, and these were secret techniques that could lead to huge changes in his battle prowess. In addition, Ling Han also cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, which allowed him to develop an astonishing physique. If he battled against someone at the same cultivation level, he was already set to be undefeatable. After battling for a long time, Fang Jin finally won by a small margin. Both of them retreated to rest, giving the battle arena to the next two challengers. Several other people went up to battle after them, and all of their battles were delightful and intense. They were all prodigies of the sect, and thus none of them would rely on a higher cultivation level to defeat their opponent. Everyone chose an opponent who was at the same cultivation level as them or at least within one minor level regardless of whether they were challenging someone or being challenged by someone. Although a difference in one minor level could also lead to a power difference of 3 stars, nothing could be done about this. There was no such thing as absolute fairness in the world. In fact, being able to win or tie while being 1 or even 2 minor levels beneath one's opponent would appear even more impressive. Achieving such a feat would exemplify one's standing as a prodigy. Although Ling Han was itching to fight, only He Tao and Wu Zhou were worthy of being his opponent. The others were genuinely too weak to pose a challenge to him. He was unwilling to pick on others, so he simply spectated the battles from his seat. Spectating battles could also aid one's comprehension, and he did indeed attain some enlightenment by watching the others battle. He was able to better combine his fast technique with the power of regulations. At its most fundamental level, cultivation can be categorized into utilizing regulations and destroying regulations. So, I can achieve the strongest Tao in the world if I'm able to unleash both of these qualities to the extreme. However, I'll need to fully comprehend the regulations if I'm to wield them to the extreme. Otherwise, how will I utilize them, and how will I destroy them? Ling Han nodded to himself. Everyone here was cultivating toward a different path, yet all of them could be of help to him. I'm Ding Ping. Please. He was lost in thought, yet he suddenly saw his disciple leap into the battle arena. His opponent was a young and fairly good-looking woman. She wore a long crimson dress, and she appeared radiant but still extremely charming. Ding Ping blushed upon seeing this beauty. He was young, and the time he had spent cultivating in seclusion far outweighed the time he had spent traveling outside and training. Thus, he was sorely lacking in experience of all sorts. Lan Luan. The young woman immediately charged toward him after announcing her name. Her weapon was a sword, and a boundless sword chi swept outward as she thrust her sword forward. Even space was torn apart, with countless fissures forming in the air. This wasn't fatal, yet it was incredibly annoying. Space had been distorted, and this would affect one's movements. Perhaps one could have advanced 15 meters with a single leap normally. However, the distortion of space meant that one might only be able to advance 9 meters. Moreover, the direction of one's leap might also be different from their intended one. The blush on Ding Ping's face immediately disappeared once he started to exchange blows with his opponent. He had experienced several battles, so he understood just how cruel and ruthless battles could be. Once on the battlefield, his opponent was his enemy. He couldn't go easy on them just because they were a beautiful woman. He roared loudly as he charged forward and swung his fists violently. He was born special, and the composition of his bones was different from others. He could unleash his power 100-fold, and this would elevate his power by 2 stars even though he was already at the mountain river tier. This was extremely astonishing. Ding Ping had almost reached a state of perfection at the shattering void tier, and after reaching the mountain river tier, his power could surpass a little over 5 stars. Add to that these 2 stars of explosive power, and there was no need for him to use any secret techniques. His fists were his most powerful weapon. His power could surpass a whopping 7 stars. He was so powerful that he could easily suppress his opponent. The Prodigies were stunned upon seeing Ding Ping unleash his full power. Although Ding Ping had already entered the Majestic Heavens Sect for a year, everyone had been working hard and cultivating before this gathering. This lad is astonishing. Power was a core attribute to cultivators. All secret techniques and martial arts techniques were built upon the basis of power. However, power was relatively hard to improve. In most cases, one's power would only be on par with their cultivation level. In fact, one would be regarded as a prodigy if their power could surpass their cultivation level by just 1 star. Even the power of seed-level prodigies like them could only surpass 5 to 6 stars. If they wanted to surpass 7 stars, they would need to form 5 mountains and rivers and break through the barrier that limited their power. It could be said that a power of 6 stars was the limit of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, Ding Ping had broken through this limitation and obtained a power of 7 stars. Moreover, he had done so without the help of any secret technique. His punch was extremely ordinary, and there were no divine patterns flashing around his fist. However, it appeared as indestructible as if it were a punch from God. Lan Wan's cultivation level was identical to Ding Ping's, with both of them being at the peak stage of the low extreme. However, her power was far weaker than his, so she was completely suppressed and unable to counterattack. She was a seed, though, so she naturally wouldn't admit defeat so easily. "Hiya," she cried softly, and streaks of blue light burst from her slender body. They surprisingly formed dozens of palm-sized birds that swooped toward Ding Ping. "Huh! Those are blue-beaked birds. These are ancient divine birds, and according to legends, they once pecked a saint to death." Someone immediately yelped in surprise, revealing an astonishing rumor as they did so. Saints were the most powerful beings of the immortal realm. They were the legends of the legends. However, a blue-beaked bird had actually pecked a saint to death? What kind of terrifying existence was this? At least 100 blue-beaked birds swooped toward Ding Ping. They opened their sharp beaks, and everyone could see the swirls of divine patterns that decorated them. One could imagine just how mighty the power of their pecks would definitely be no weaker than an attack from a god tool. Even saints could be pecked to death, and this proved just how powerful these birds were. Although they were only unleashed from the body of mountain river tier cultivator, their might was still relatively impressive. Ding Ping was unfazed, and he continued to launch punches toward his opponent. The might of his fists compressed the air and formed layers of waves that obliterated the blue-beaked birds before they could even reach him. Lan Wan let out a shrill cry, and the blue light that was bursting from her body gathered together to form a giant blue-beaked bird. The aura that radiated from this bird instantly soared significantly. Chapter 1149, the Rain Emperor was still forceful. Lan Wan's cultivation level was at the peak of the low extreme of Mountain River tier, but presently, the aura this blue-beaked bird was exuding had shockingly reached the medium extreme, and was even the late stage of the medium extreme. Her battle prowess was naturally even more frightening than before. When everyone saw this, they were all astounded. This was equivalent to boosting her battle prowess by a whole minor level. The battle prowess of people like them would be capable of surpassing 5 stars, and with a boost of another minor level, the battle prowess would directly spike to 9 stars. This was really too shocking. However, to deliver this kind of attack, the strain on Lan Wan was also exceedingly heavy. Her beautiful face had turned completely pale, and there was blood seeping out from the corner of her lips. Her life essence had suddenly dropped greatly. Perhaps delivering this attack would even shorten her lifespan itself. This young girl really had a powerful competitive spirit. It was merely a spar, and she actually shortened her own lifespan. Even if she won, it would be damaging her opponent by paying the price of damage to herself. Ding Ping rushed forward with a great shout, but the moment his fists came into contact with that blue-beaked bird, his whole person was sent flying out. With a bang, he collapsed onto the ground, and his hands were severely injured. His arms were completely bloody. Lan Wan did not appear to be any better. She sat abruptly on the ground, covered by sweat, an air of weakness exuding from her. If this blow of hers had not succeeded, then it would have been definitely impossible for her to deliver a second attack. She could only claim to have one narrowly. However, Ding Ping had not used any powerful moves before he had been defeated by this powerful move which she had expended her life essence in return for. In truth, this was reasonable. After all, they were in the same cultivation level. The Rain Emperor leaped out, grabbed Ding Ping, and brought him to stand beside the rock. He couldn't help but shake his head. Actually, he was more in favor of Ding Ping's victory, but this guy seemed to have fallen for his opponent, and actually did not make any powerful moves, and chose to take her attack head-on instead. Wasn't this seeking his own defeat? After he placed Ding Ping down, he strode down into the arena, and called out, "Who would battle with me?" Though he had laid down his identity of an emperor, he had not abandoned the pride that belonged to one. In terms of bearing, there were really not many people here that could be a match for the Rain Emperor, though he was still only in the early stage of the medium extreme. I shall. A young man wearing a green shirt leaped out. He was dressed completely in rich robes, and was also wearing a great number of ornaments. Furthermore, each of the ornaments he was wearing exuded a vague aura. They were definitely out of the common run. This man either had to be a newly rich upstart or his clan was too noble if he was wearing so many accessories. That is Chao Xian. Chao. Someone from the Chao clan? That's right, it is that Chao clan. Gasp. Chao clan was a great clan, and had once produced a great elite of the Eternal River tier very, very long ago, possessing supreme glory once. But when that great elite dispersed into Dao, the Chao clan had no qualified successors to carry on their undertakings. As a result, they were naturally not as glorious as they once had been. This Chao Xian had ambition, and desired to revive the glory of his ancestors. Indeed, he was amazingly talented. However, he was too arrogant, thinking that not one person in this place could be his equal. At most, all of you will only be capable of reaching the heavenly body tier, but I am the one who will reach the eternal river tier. However, his cultivation level presently was still too weak, merely in the late stage of the medium extreme of mountain river tier. After all, he was too young, and had only cultivated for close to 100 years. Yet, he had managed to reach this level after a mere century. This was very impressive. As his cultivation level increased, the Rain Emperor began to look younger and younger, but no matter how much younger, it was impossible that he would regain his looks from when he was in his teens and 20s. Presently, he looked to be about 27 to 28 years old, and among this group of young people, he appeared to be much older. There was nothing to be done. In terms of actual age, the Rain Emperor was younger than the majority of them, but who asked him to have already been close to 60 years old when he finally stepped into the flower blossom tier? In everyone's eyes, This was proof that the Rain Emperor lacked sufficient talent. Wasn't it? For prodigies like them, who had broken through to the flower blossom tier when they were merely 7 or 8 years old, their bodies would only grow, but would not age in the slightest. What did aging signify? That your cultivation level would not be able to keep up, and your life essence would be greatly lost. Otherwise, why would one have aged? Chao Xian bore a smile on his face, though he was internally disdainful. He was actually a seed just like this kind of trash. This was practically an insult to him. Fine then, he would give this person a lesson. The best scenario would be that he could let the Rain Emperor withdraw from the sect of his own volition to avoid pulling his own standing as a seed. Here I come. He had a very low opinion of Rain Emperor, and when he pressed down with his palm in attack, it was done very carelessly. The Rain Emperor made his move. Hong, his forceful presence surged in all directions, his fists falling like rain. What? A shocked expression immediately appeared on Chao Xian's face. He had not thought that the Rain Emperor's attack would be so fierce. He was indeed powerful, but he might not be stronger than the Rain Emperor. Hence, now that the Rain Emperor had taken the initiative, he was naturally forced into retreat, and could only defend himself against the incoming attacks. How rich and abundant was the Rain Emperor's battle experience. It could be claimed that if the two of them had the same cultivation level and trump cards, even Ling Han was not sure he could be able to defeat the Rain Emperor. Now that he had the upper hand, his attacks were endless and pervasive. Who could underestimate the Rain Emperor? As someone who had broken through to the Mountain River tier with 19 stars of strength, though he had not perfected his cultivation, 1 star of strength on Shattering Void tier would have an influence of half a star at most in the Mountain River tier. It would definitely not lead to a world of difference. Peng, 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 peng. The Rain Emperor continued his fury of attacks, and Chao Xian was forced into retreat. When he had taken his 17th step back, Chao Xian spat out a mouthful of blood, and was sent flying with a single punch. Thanks for the win. The Rain Emperor stopped his attack. This was merely a spar, so he naturally had to take care not to overdo it with his attack. Chao Xian leaped up, and his face was completely flushed. How could this be endured? He had looked down greatly on the Rain Emperor, yet did not even manage to get a chance to fight back before he was defeated by the Rain Emperor. This was practically a plaque of humiliation on the path of his cultivation. He was someone who would become an elite of the Eternal River tier, so how could he accept this kind of terrible defeat? Again. He leaped out. This time, he dared not be careless again. The light of Great Tao surged from his whole body, and interwoven divine patterns appeared, boosting his battle prowess to the peak. The spectators looked on, and they were all shaking their heads internally. You had already lost, yet were so sore about your defeat. That would only lead to others having an even lower opinion of you. Thus, talent was only one factor of the equation. This was the prerequisite for becoming an elite, but if you wanted to become an elite, mere talent was far from enough. But they had to admit that the present Chao Xian was very strong, and could definitely not be taken lightly. The Rain Emperor humphed coldly. He had also been angered as well. He looked down on such a sore loser. Then, he merely had to punch him out again. He shot out a punch at Chao Xian. Peng! 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 One punch followed after another. Though Chao Xian was prepared this time, he was still forced into a retreat by the Rain Emperor's attacks. He was actually still being completely subdued. Hey, why is this guy's fist technique so frightening? In terms of power, it would be Chao Xian who is slightly superior, but why would he be at a disadvantage in a head-on exchange of blows? That person's fist technique is too powerful. Every punch seemed to have condensed the bearing of heaven and earth. He has the potential to become a grandmaster of his era. The people here all knew what was what, and they were incredibly stunned. The Rain Emperor's cultivation level could not be considered the apex in this place, but in terms of fist techniques, he had far surpassed all the so-called seeds, and reached a height that others could only look up to. Second brother's fist technique is close to Tao. This is worthy of celebration. Ling Han murmured quietly, a smile appearing on his face. In the great tomb in the galaxy, he had seen the sword of the Great Tao, and the Rain Emperor's fist technique seemed to be similarly boosted by Great Tao, so its might was naturally incredible. However, he had been inspired after obtaining the sword of the Great Tao, and only then did he comprehend his own path, while the Rain Emperor had completely relied on his own comprehension abilities. With such a comparison, even Ling Han had to admit he was convinced of the Rain Emperor's genius. This second brother of his was really born an extraordinary genius of martial arts. Chapter 1150, Vile Conduct. The Rain Emperor had truly been angered, and after 10 punches, Chao Xian was once again sent flying. Too powerful. They were obviously of similar cultivation levels. Chao Xian was even 2 sub-minor levels higher than him, but within 10 moves, he was already defeated. This was too unbelievable. It should be known that they were all seeds, and were all super geniuses. With similar cultivation levels, it should have been a closely locked battle no matter what. Yet, the result was a completely one-sided battle. Moreover, the Rain Emperor's cultivation level was slightly lower, and there was a gap of 2 stars of power. Yet Ling Han knew that the path the Rain Emperor walked was a path of forcefulness and ferocity. If he could win, then about 10 moves would be enough, and if the battle dragged onto from 10 to 100 moves, it was proof that the Rain Emperor was actually at a disadvantage. Chao Xian had been defeated twice, and his face was no longer flushed red. Instead, he bore a livid expression. He could no longer find the face to stay here. Covering his face, he left. If he stayed here any longer, the looks from all the spectators would be like swords and knives, and might cause him to collapse. The Rain Emperor's fighting spirit burned, and he asked, "Who else would do battle with me?" Everyone looked at each other. Those who had a similar cultivation level with the Rain Emperor had absolutely no certainty that they could defeat the Rain Emperor, and for those whose cultivation levels were higher than the Rain Emperor, they could not find the nerve to make a move. Previously, even Chao Xian, who was in the late stage of the medium extreme, had been easily defeated. Then, it was obvious that the late stage of the medium extreme was not quite good enough. But if one was in the high extreme, this gap was a little too big, wasn't it? Who would have the nerve to take that kind of advantage? Hence, the Rain Emperor asked for a battle. Though there was more than 100 people here, still, no one accepted his challenge. Ho ho, we can't let the atmosphere get cold. How about this? I'll come and fight. Wuxia stood up. The others all looked at one another. This was one of the 6 king tiers. If he made a move, aside from He Tao, who would be able to match him? Moreover, the gap between cultivation levels was really too huge, wasn't it? Could this even be considered a spar? To be fair, I will seal off my cultivation level, and we shall battle with the same cultivation level, Wuxia said. He pressed a few times on some parts of his body, and true enough, his aura immediately dropped to a level about similar to the Rain Emperor's. "Junior brother, is this fair?" he asked with a smile. The Rain Emperor did not answer. Instead, he merely shouted, and fighting spirit burned strongly in his eyes. Then, he began a mad barrage of attacks towards Wuxia. Peng, 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 peng. His punches fell like rain, and even someone as strong as Wuxia could actually only parry, and was forced into continuous retreat. Everyone was shocked, struck mute with astonishment. That was Wuxia, one of the 6 publicly acknowledged king tiers. They were capable of sweeping aside all mountain river tier cultivators, and only the other 5 would qualify to be a match for him. But now, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, it was actually the Rain Emperor who was pressing down on Wuxia. This was really an incredible shock. When the Rain Emperor, too, reached the peak stage of the mountain river tier in future, wouldn't there be 7 great king tiers then? Although there was a serene smile on Wuxia's face, he was actually cursing internally. He, too, had not foreseen that the Rain Emperor's fist technique would be as powerful as this. When he had watched earlier, he had only thought it was fierce, but now that he himself was on the receiving end, he realized that the latter's fist technique was practically close to heavenly Tao. Every attack of his fist was like the heavens itself pressing down on him. He was completely incapable of resisting. It was not that he had no means of fighting back, but in terms of power, it had to be a complete domination. But now that their cultivation levels were the same, what did he have that could dominate over the Rain Emperor? He could not accept the result of being defeated, even if he had suppressed his cultivation level. As a king tier, how could he lose in a battle of equal cultivation levels? He suddenly threw out a punch, and forcefully greeted the Rain Emperor with his own attack. Pang! The two fists crashed into each other, and all of a sudden, a frightening shock wave was generated. Even if all the people here were seed-level geniuses, they still had to stretch out a shield of origin power. Otherwise, if they were scraped by this gust of wind, it would definitely not be a pleasant experience. Wuxia and the Rain Emperor pulled back at the same time. Teng, teng, teng. Wuxia took 7 steps back, whereas the Rain Emperor retreated 9 steps. In terms of power, he was at a slight disadvantage, but the difference was that there was blood seeping out of the Rain Emperor's fist. His arm was also visibly bent and broken. It was obvious that the bone was broken. In this clash, the Rain Emperor had lost completely. As expected of senior brother Wu. His place as one of the 6 king tiers had definitely not come through boasting. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he is invincible, the spectators praised. This result was what they had imagined. Yet Ling Han's eyes frosted over as he stared at Wuxia. Just now, the number of divine patterns that had flickered on Wuxia's fist were as many as 91. This meant that though he had not used power above the medium extreme, he had used the power of regulations. Of course, it was not fair. Though power was the most important factor of a cultivator, regulations should similarly not be underestimated. Just like in the large galactic tomb, the power of that stone statue formation had not changed the whole time, but because the might of the divine patterns increased, the might of the stone statue formation had correspondingly risen as well. This should not have been possible for a cultivator to do, but Wuxia, one with a superior cultivation level facing an opponent of an inferior cultivation level in a situation wherein power was unchanging, could increase the might of his divine patterns. The results could be claimed to be exactly the same as the stone statue formation's workings. Wuxia had done this very secretly, but how could he possibly fool Ling Han, who possessed the eye of truth? You dare to bully my second brother? Fury abruptly surged within Ling Han. He glared fixedly at Wuxia. He would definitely avenge this loss. The Rain Emperor was a straightforward character. He, too, had sensed something off, but a loss was still a loss. There was no excuse. Hence, he nodded, and said, I have lost. While speaking, he retreated back to his original position and Saturday. Thank you for the battle. Wuxia made a pretense of being modest. Senior brother disciple Wu, please fight me. Ling Han was just about to walk down into the arena when he saw someone was a step earlier than he. He had already leaped into the arena before him, so Ling Han could only choose to temporarily abandon his plans. This person was Su Jing. Please. Wuxia released the restrictions on his cultivation level. His opponent was at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, so there was no need for him to deliberately suppress his cultivation level. As a senior disciple, I will limit my moves to 10. As long as junior brother Su can take 10 moves from me, it will be considered my loss. How confidently had he spoken such words? But it was not going too far. If he did not suppress his cultivation level, he possessed the power of 5 mountain rivers, and his strength would reach 7 stars at least. Even if there was only a gap of a single star between 6 and 7 stars, this gap of a single star was extremely massive. Su Jing did not dare be careless. His opponent was a king tier of Mountain River tier, and had truly stood on the pinnacle of this domain. His strength had exceeded all imagination. He used a powerful move at the first instance. Endless divine light entwined around his entire body, and in a single instant, his body had turned into a volcano. There were bright crimson flows of lava surging all over his body, and he breathed very hot air from his nostrils. Was this still human? This was obviously a giant of lava and fire. Wuxia indulged him calmly. Someone who had not formed his fifth mountain river could not possibly know how powerful this cultivation level was. Even if there was only an additional star of strength, this was the pinnacle level. It was even harder to cultivate than the Sun-Moon tier. If one could not sweep aside all mountain river tier cultivators below this cultivation level, then what was the point of cultivating the pinnacle level in the first place? Su Jing shot out a palm strike, and the area was completely covered with crimson flames as lava gushed. It was as if doomsday had come. Everyone quickly put up a shield of origin power. This was battle prowess on the level of consummate level, and could not be compared to the previous battles at all. Boom! 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 Su Jing attacked continuously, and Wuxia merely parried his blows casually. He appeared so completely careless, and very much at ease. 9 moves. Wuxia smiled, and said, "Please be careful, junior brother Su. I am about to counterattack." You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.